Rain lashes against the arena as two swordsmen clash, but the silver-haired Weiss just sneers, mocking his commoner opponent for thinking he could ever win. The signal drops and Weiss lunges for the kill, while a voice in the crowd tells Lilith to enjoy the sight of this peasant getting publicly humiliated. In a heartbeat, the duel is over, leaving the dark-haired hero standing tall over a broken Weiss and his shattered blade as a girl's scream echoes through the stadium. This pathetic loser is none other than Weiss Vincent, the man infamously known as the villainous noble. Across dimensions, a gamer stares at a victory screen, knowing that after this loss to the hero Alan, Weiss becomes a disposable meat shield for the Demon King and loses everything. Weiss's tragic story ends in a cold, lonely death, but at that exact moment, the gamer's heart stops and his controller hits the floor. Deep within a massive estate, a terrified maid trembles in tears as she stares down a pitch-black, ominous corridor. Her worst nightmare comes true when Weiss Vincent steps out of the shadows, looming over her with a riding crop and a terrifying new aura of authority. A wicked, predatory grin stretches across his face as he licks his lips, savoring the absolute dominance he holds in this brand new life. His eyes snap open, narrowing as the chilling reality of his reincarnation finally sinks in. Right there in front of him, a young girl was kneeling on the floor with her hands bound tight. The sight left him completely paralyzed, his mind spinning as he tried to process the chaos. She looked just as terrified, her voice trembling as she begged to know where she was and who he was. He recoiled in horror, suddenly realizing he was clutching a whip, and screamed out, "What the hell?" His thoughts were a blur. 1 second he was playing a game, and now he's staring at a captive woman. "Lord Weiss, what's wrong?" she asked, her stunning beauty only making the strange name more confusing. He repeated the name Weiss under his breath, a chilling sense of recognition washing over him. Cold dread filled his veins as the truth clicked. He had become the most hated, abusive noble in existence. He caught his reflection in a mirror and froze. There was no mistake. He was now the legendary villain Weiss Vincent. This was the world of Noblesse Oblige, a fantasy game he had mastered and beaten countless times. In that twisted game, Weiss was the villainous noble, the ruthless enemy blocking Alan's path during the school arc. He was the lowest scum, abusing his overwhelming power to crush anyone weaker than him without mercy. His reign of cruelty ended with a crushing defeat by the hero, leaving Weiss broken and forced into servitude under the Demon King. His final fate? Nothing but a disposable shield, meeting a shameful and brutal death. Suddenly, his mind snapped back to the present as he stared at the tied-up girl. Lilith Scarlet, the maid, hit him like a nightmare. He recalled another cruel fact from the game's lore. The original Weiss took sick pleasure in tormenting Lilith. Rage contorted his face. What a monstrous bastard. How could anyone be that vile? Seriously, what a scumbag. He clenched his fists, determined he had to free her right now. But as he reached out, a chilling thought froze him. If Weiss suddenly acted kind, wouldn't Lilith find it suspicious? She looked up, her eyes unreadable, silently questioning. She stayed tied, but Weiss couldn't walk away. Enough was enough. He started loosening the ropes binding her wrists. As he works, his eyes lock onto the brutal bruises on her neck, and his heart stops in pure shock. She's trembling, a shattered soul in agony, and he knows he has to take a gamble as he reaches out to intervene. Stealing his nerves, he thrusts his glowing palms forward and unleashes a powerful healing spell. A soothing heat wraps around her throat, the scars evaporating into thin air as she finally breathes a sigh of pure relief. He remembers a secret tip from his past life's strategy guide, a hidden skill the devs tucked away for players to use right from level 1. Panicking, he plays it cool and turns away, barking at her not to get the wrong idea since he was just practicing his magic. Her shock turns into pure, tearful gratitude as she prays in thanks, but her face suddenly goes pale as a haunting silence takes over. Weiss is spiraling, unable to fathom why she'd thank the man who ruined her life, while Lilith stands there, stunned that he could even use healing magic. Her words cut deep, leaving him drowning in guilt as he looks away, barely able to choke out her name through the shame. With a look of pure agony, he begs Lilith for forgiveness and swears on his life that the monster he used to be is gone forever. Lilith stood frozen outside the massive mansion, her jaw hitting the floor in pure shock. Inside the lavish dining hall, Weiss sat in solitary silence, while Lilith watched his every move with suspicious eyes. The butler, Sevas, was panicking inside, remembering how the old Weiss used to scream and smash plates in a blind rage. Weiss looked the butler in the eye and dropped a bombshell, apologizing for how horribly he used to treat his meals. He even praised the seasoning as absolute perfection, leaving the butler completely floored by this sudden kindness. Choking back a wave of raw emotion, the butler could barely even mutter the young master's name. His professional mask finally shattered as he burst into tears, crying out that he'd never been more honored in his entire life. Weiss felt totally awkward as the staff wept around him, all of them convinced that their master had finally become a saint. As they celebrated his growth, Weiss realized the truth. They had no idea a completely different soul was now inhabiting this body. Looking at their tearful faces, it finally clicked. The original Weiss must have been an absolute monster. He's done being a monster, and as he clutches that cruel rod, he swears he'll never break Lilith's heart again, a promise that makes her eyes sparkle with pure joy. He marches across the estate grounds with a heart of steel, knowing that throwing away his past is just the first step in his total transformation. The clock is ticking toward the Elite Academy entrance exam, a mandatory trial for every noble that's now only 2 short years away. He shudders at the memory of the original timeline, where a humiliating defeat by the protagonist sent the name Weiss Vincent spiraling into the abyss. But what if he wins? A spark of hope ignites as he realizes he can rewrite his destiny, and he's ready to seize this second chance with everything he's got. He reaches out and grabs his only hope, a mysterious, intensely glowing object buried deep within a pile of shattered wood. With eyes burning with the object's radiant light, he vows to push past his limits and shatter the path to his own destruction. He pushes his body to the absolute breaking point, leaving him drenched in sweat and desperately gasping for every breath. Just as he collapses onto a stump to recover, a piercing voice screams his name, and he looks up to see a menacing figure looming in the distance. Trembling and covered in sweat, he begs for a single second of rest, but the legendary S-rank adventurer Mika just glares down at him, demanding to know if he's even taking this training seriously. She takes one look at his battered body and finally gives in, ordering him to go get some actual rest. Her eyes turn cold as she delivers a brutal warning. Unless he wants to be branded a pathetic loser the second he sets foot in the academy. That insult hits him like a physical blow, and as he grinds through agonizing dual sword drills, he remembers using his family's influence to hire this legendary master, only for her to shred every mistake he makes, from his stance down to his wrists. Meet Mika, a terrifying powerhouse known as the strongest warrior in the entire royal capital and a legend who usually only appears at the very end of the game. She watches him with a chilling, sadistic smirk, and though Weiss begged her to train him without mercy, he's now realizing just how frightening this woman truly is. Weiss grabs a crucial item from Lilith, and when she asks about the writing on his new headband, he stares down Mika and vows to push himself until his very last breath. This world is a brutal, high-stakes death game where one mistake means the end, a grim reality proven by the sight of Alan lying broken and defeated on the floor. Desperate to avoid a similar fate, Weiss throws himself into training, realizing he's never truly pushed his body before. But with death or expulsion looming, he can't afford to waste a single second. He knows he needs a rock-solid foundation for both swords and magic. But the grind is soul-crushing as sweat drenches his face and he battles through the agonizing strain. Every single day kicks off with grueling sword drills, all performed under the cold, unwavering gaze of Mika. He dives into a brutal workout from hell, sprinting until his lungs burn just to shatter his own limits. This nightmare never stops, grinding from sunrise to sunset without a single second to catch his breath. To survive this torture, Weiss whips up a high-protein feast designed to rebuild his muscles and fuel his explosive growth. 2 weeks of pure agony fly by, and as Weiss stuffs his face, he apologizes for the trouble. But the butler reminds him that magic heals wounds, while food builds a warrior. With this elite support system, he knew the young master could survive even the most insane levels of overwork. 3 weeks in, and Weiss is absolutely drenched in sweat, fighting through bone-deep exhaustion to keep moving. This training is a total nightmare, making every grueling day feel like an entire month of suffering. The sun dips below the horizon in a flash, but the training doesn't stop for anyone. Inside the manor, Zevis decides Weiss is finally tough enough, so it's time to call in the magic instructor. As the teacher steps forward, a battered Weiss prays this new mentor is way more merciful than the last one. Just as he's guessing who his guest might be, the door groans open, and a mysterious cloaked figure glides inside, their gear magically flying onto the coat rack as a chilling voice rings out. It's Mika Iotis. Weiss hits the floor in pure, unadulterated despair, screaming in horror as she gives him a formal, terrifying greeting. Looking down with a twisted smirk, she reminds him that she's a master of both the blade and the arcane, mockingly asking why he'd even bother showing his face again. As she looms in the doorway, Zevis reminds a trembling Weiss that he did ask for a kind teacher, before revealing that Mika is a legendary genius who commands 2 of the 4 great elements. She flashes a professional grin and tells them to leave the training to her, but as she promises to be gentle, her voice turns ice-cold, leaving Weiss stammering in absolute terror. Her gentle training is a total nightmare, as Weiss is forced to stand barefoot under a crushing waterfall, screaming in pain while Mika barks orders from above to keep his eyes open and pump out more mana. He's barely hanging on when she calmly tells him to endure it for 2 more hours, making Weiss realize this hellish ordeal is way more brutal than any sword training he's ever faced. Mika shuts down his internal whining with a cold truth. If he wants magic, he needs mana, and the only way to get it is through this agonizing, soul-crushing grind. Then comes the kicker. He has to do this every single day until he passes out, causing Weiss to collapse into the water in protest, just as Lilith sprints through the woods toward them. This hell becomes his new life, balancing grueling mana drills with intense wooden sword duels where he struggles to survive against Mika's effortless, overwhelming power. The combat training was a total nightmare. Mika deflected his strike like it was nothing, sending him crashing back as he gasped for air while she coldly mocked his pathetic defense. He collapsed into the dirt, lungs burning and body broken, but then Lilith knelt by his side, her hands glowing with a soothing light as she cast a spell to knit his wounds back together. Lilith whispered that she'd always have his back with her magic, cheering him on to keep fighting, while Weiss realized the brutal truth. He'd become his teacher's personal punching bag. Covered in filth and drenched in sweat, Weiss Vincent forced himself to keep moving even as a bizarre realization flashed through his mind. He couldn't believe that a naturally lazy guy like him was actually redlining his body, enduring a relentless barrage of water magic without quitting. This fire in his soul was the complete opposite of his old self. In his past life, he was a walking ghost who ran from every problem and surrendered before the fight even started. He struggled to understand the change, wondering how he went from a total quitter to a warrior who could survive Mika's non-stop, brutal assault. 2 months of pure hell flew by, and Weiss sat by the riverbank, wiping the sweat from his face as the massive waterfall thundered behind him. While he caught his breath, he felt a soft touch on his head and jumped in surprise, looking up to find Mika Oda standing right over him. She actually gave him a rare, gentle smile, praising him for smashing his goal in just 2 hours, a massive leap forward from where he started. Heat flushed his face as he wondered if this soft pat was the gentle training his sensei had promised. She confirmed it with a smirk. Every time he hits a goal, she'll reward him with a pass. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he realized the rewards were nothing compared to the brutal punishments waiting for him. He looked up confused, but Mika stepped from the shadows to tell him he was dead wrong, while Lilith froze as the atmosphere turned cold. Ignoring the heavy vibe, she stepped toward Weiss with a bright smile and announced she'd brought him a feast. Mika made it clear, she's the stick, meant to deliver brutal discipline because everyone else is already spoiling him. She warned him never to forget the people who keep him going, right as Lilith stood there holding his lunch basket. Lilith tilted her head in total confusion, but for Weiss, a sudden wave of realization hit him like a lightning bolt. He finally understood that the only reason he can push past his limits is because of the incredible people backing him up. His mind raced to Zevis, who kept him fed, and Lilith, who never left his side for a single second. And then there's Mika Sensei, who steeled her resolve to push him toward a power he never knew he had. He finally realizes the truth. Without the help of his allies, he would have crashed and burned a long time ago. This is a massive shift from the selfish person he used to be, both as a corrupt Weiss and in his previous life. He remembers his old life as a hollow, lonely void where no one supported him, and no one cared enough to even scold him. Now he knows what he was missing, that perfect balance of tough love and kindness he received from Lilith, Zevis, and Mika. His eyes snap open with a fierce, burning determination as he swears an oath to never live for just himself again. He used to only care about surviving, but now he's striving for greatness, so the people who saved him never have to suffer through his failures. Standing tall between Lilith and Mika, he declares his new path. For his own sake and for his friends, he will shatter his destiny of ruin. That resolve explodes into brutal action as he pushes his body to the absolute breaking point under the scorching sun. Alan collapses from the strain, but Weiss stands firm as Mika's voice demands the impossible, forcing him to train until his very last breath. Weiss Vincent marches through the packed city streets with Mika, Iotis, and Lilith Scarlet, questioning if being flanked by these girls is actually supposed to be a dream date. They've arrived at League Belt Town, the very first location where the game's protagonist begins his epic journey. His eyes narrow with pure irritation as he fumes, realizing this whole setup feels like a total cheat code. He glances at Mika, calling her Milk Sensei, while mocking the city's pathetic security, just as thugs in the background start screaming death threats at a helpless citizen. Brimming with dark confidence, he stares straight ahead and demands to know exactly who his opponent is. It's time to flex. After 3 grueling months of training, he's finally facing a real-world test, though he wonders if this combat is just a staged fight against some low-level thug. Suddenly, Mika shoots him a sinister, knowing grin that sends a jolt of pure alarm through his body. She mistakes his panic for hype, clenching her fists and cheering him on to fight his hardest while promising to handpick the ultimate opponent. leaving Weiss drenched in a cold sweat. As the trio moves out, a mohawked creep spots them from the shadows, grinning as he points them out to his gang of thugs. These bottom feeders leer at the group, with one creep eyeing their bodies, while a striped-haired freak declares that the little one is exactly his type. Mika covers her ears and screams at the thugs to shut their mouths, warning them that Weiss is about to end their lives. Weiss's anger flares as he looks back at the creeps, remembering that League Belltown is a lawless pit, crawling with the worst scum imaginable. He clenches his fists, his patience hitting zero, as he vows that no matter what, he will protect Lilith from these losers. Just as he's ready to strike, Mika tells him to just ignore the trash, and Weiss's eyes sharpen with a new, intense focus. Suddenly, Lilith's dark mood flips, and she beams with a sunny aura, happily agreeing that Mika is totally right. Weiss is totally stunned, wondering if he just imagined that terrifying, killing intent she was radiating as they approach a massive structure. This is the local Adventurers Guild, a huge, two-story hall filled with rowdy warriors and a massive wooden bar. The air is thick with noise as the bartender serves a wild crowd, including scarred veterans and mysterious hooded figures. But the peace is instantly shattered when three menacing thugs, one spiky-haired, one bald, and one with an afro, glare at them with pure hatred. They surround Weiss in a heartbeat, and the guy with the afro looms over him, growling for the kid to step outside right now. A cold chill strikes Weiss as he realizes the thugs blocking his path are none other than the infamous Boudin brothers. Mika exposes their horrific history of murder and slave trading, explaining that their protection from the corrupt police has finally vanished. She flashes a confident smirk, declaring these monsters the perfect targets for Weiss to unleash his full power without holding back. As they move through the city, she draws his attention to the brutal violence erupting in the streets, leaving Weiss staring on with a face splattered in blood. Her sharp eyes scan him intensely as she bluntly tells him that while he has the will to fight, he's still a complete amateur in a real war. She hammers home the point that real combat is unavoidable, so he might as well dive into the deep end right here and now. Watching from the shadows, Zevis looks on with dread, knowing that if Weiss doesn't survive this trial with Mika's help, his next solo encounter will likely end in his death. Mika gives him a warm, reassuring smile, promising to protect him if things get too dangerous, leaving Weiss feeling incredibly grateful for such a reliable ally. That sense of security is shattered instantly as the Boudin brothers snatch Weiss and drag him through the streets while he screams for a partner who is nowhere to be found. He thrashes against their iron grip as they shove him into a dark alley, the crushing truth hitting him. Mika played him for a fool and abandoned him the moment the real fight started. Cornered and desperate, Weiss's mind races for an escape, but he realizes there's no running away. He steels his resolve and prepares to fight for his life. He locked onto his target with lethal focus. He had to sever one of their limbs. He sized them up, realizing these weren't just street punks, they were dangerous pros, and in a 3-on-1 brawl, he wasn't even sure he'd survive. His mind flashed back to the moment before the trap, knowing that if he let them corner him in that alley, a bloody showdown was inevitable. Mika's confident voice echoed in his mind, reminding him that as long as he stuck to her training, he'd come out on top. As the thugs dragged him away, he visualized the lethal lesson Milk Sensei had drilled into his soul. From a nearby rooftop, Mika and Lilith watched the Boudin brothers shove Weiss through massive doors, barking at him to pick up the pace. Lilith couldn't believe how cold Mika was being, but Mika just shrugged, claiming that without this kind of pressure, Weiss would never find his true spark. Lilith argued that a safety net ruins the training, while Mika slumped onto the table, muttering she'd jump in if things got deadly. though she didn't sound very convincing. Later, Lilith stepped into a tavern crawling with scum, where that same bald thug from the alley immediately recognized her. A mohawked freak started drooling over her beauty, while the bald guy grinned at their perfect timing. But Lilith just watched them close in with a stone-cold stare. She's trapped in the booth with nowhere to run as the local gang of thieves closes in to claim their territory. A thug with a twisted grin points to a group of kidnapped women, mocking her that they were looking for more entertainment for the night. Her eyes snap wide, her pupils shrinking into needle points of pure, icy rage. In a heartbeat, a geyser of blood erupts, painting the entire room crimson. Two thugs stand frozen in the gore, staring in absolute shock at the shadow that just unleashed hell. Before they can even blink, a silent hand drops onto the spiky-haired thug's shoulder like a death sentence. The bald thug screams in agony as he's cut down, leaving his crew paralyzed by the sudden, brutal carnage. A flashback hits as Weiss grips his blade, remembering the golden rule of survival. You have to strike first. He hears Mika's voice echoing in his head, reminding him that catching an enemy off guard is deadlier than any master technique. Her lesson was brutal. Even a grandmaster dies if their neck snaps before they can brace, and the strongest mage falls if they're hit before they can raise a single shield. He stares down the three thugs with ice-cold focus, declaring that his strategy is dead simple. Weiss explodes into motion, striking before they can even blink, as his boot smashes right into the spiky-haired punk's skull. As the thug staggers back, Weiss pivots with a flashing blade toward the bald man, realizing he's spent his whole life hesitating. His assault is a blur as he rejects his old self. No more waiting for tomorrow, because from now on, he strikes the instant a choice is made. Fueled by this new fire, he lunges at the final thug with a roar, determined to bury his lazy past under the weight of his blade. The strike lands perfectly, and Weiss gasps for air as he stands over the broken bodies of his three attackers. He knows he only won because he caught them off guard. If they had been powered up and ready for war, he'd be a dead man. Drenched in sweat, he hears a voice praise his performance, only to find Mika Aota watching him from the shadows. She breaks down his score, admitting that while she's impressed, she's only giving him a 70 out of 100. Mika coldly claims she would have hacked off an arm back at the guild to be truly efficient, while a starstruck Lilith screams that he deserves 200 points. Her harsh words still sting, and as Weiss thinks of Mika and Lilith, a cold sweat starts dripping down his face. Their voices snap him back to reality as Mika scolds him for vanishing, while Lilith just offers a shy, awkward apology. Suddenly, a dark, ominous stain on her sleeve catches the light, even though she looks completely relieved with her hands clasped in prayer. His eyes lock onto the spot, and he demands to know if that's blood, but she desperately brushes it off as a total hallucination. But he's not crazy. The truth is way darker, because just moments ago, Lilith and another girl were bound and gagged in a terrifying hostage situation. The rescue was a total bloodbath, leaving 20 notorious thieves broken on the floor while the girls kneel before a mysterious man in a butler's suit. Back at the peaceful gazebo, the report comes in. Nobody died, but those bandits were beaten so badly they can't even utter a single word. She grips a newspaper announcing the arrest of the infamous Boutin brothers, featuring a massive photo of Weiss sporting a cocky, confident smirk. Staring out the window with a soft smile, she rests her chin on her hand and whispers his name with pure affection. A formal thank you letter and a pile of cash arrive at the estate, but Weiss just plays dumb and asks Lilith what a band of thieves even is. 18 months of hellish training have passed, and Weiss stands like a statue under a crashing waterfall, his body transformed into a living weapon. Every brutal session ended the same way, Weiss collapsing from total exhaustion, while Mika kept a sharp, watchful eye on him. But then, everything changed. His eyes snapped open as a surge of raw, untapped power ignited within his soul. He doesn't fall anymore. Now, he obliterates massive logs with a single empowered strike and a confident smirk. That night, he felt mana surging through his veins like liquid fire, realizing he could even sense enemies hiding behind solid walls. Back at the estate, Zevis asks for an update, and Weiss calmly confirms that his magical growth is exploding. He admits that Mika's brutal Spartan drills are pure torture, forcing him to master fire, water, wind, and earth all at once. The real nightmare is balancing them all, but as he speaks, he summons all 4 elements simultaneously, leaving Ziva completely speechless. Weiss secretly thinks Mika is a total demon, way more terrifying than the thugs he previously crushed. Zevis reveals the truth. Mika is only being this ruthless because Weiss's talent is absolutely legendary. Watching the staff, Zevis ponders the absolute laws of magic, where most are trapped with one element, while a dark-haired maid watches him from the shadows. He knows even an S-rank powerhouse like Mika is limited to 2, remembering the days when she, Lilith, and Alan were nothing but a pile of chaotic limbs on the floor. But Weiss is a total freak of nature, mastering all 4 elements as Zevis envisions him effortlessly commanding fire, water, wind, and earth. That legendary potential would have rotted away if Weiss hadn't traded his pathetic laziness for a level of grit that Zevis never saw coming. With a faint, approving smile, Zevis finally admits to himself that the boy has transformed into someone truly remarkable. The thought passes, leaving Zevis alone in the eerie silence of a massive empty hall, staring at a grand, covered table. But the quiet is ripped apart by a haunting memory. A young Weiss, drenched in sweat and tears, clutching his head and begging for the pain to stop. He's pleading with Mika, who stands over him with a wooden sword, while Lilith screams at her to stop shattering the boy's face. As the full moon hangs overhead, Mika coldly demands he reveal his magic, but all the broken boy can do is sob and apologize. Then he rises, his eyes burning with a terrifying new focus, as blinding light and soul-crushing darkness explode from his hands, leaving them both in total shock. Enveloped in a swirling vortex of shadows, she stands tall as Mika and Lilith watch in disbelief, realizing she's mastered the legendary forces of light and dark alongside the 4 basic elements. With a cocky smirk, he reveals he's been hiding this trump card until it was perfect, admitting that even now, it's still a work in progress. Mika can't believe her ears, echoing the word incomplete, as he confesses he hasn't fully mastered the devastating technique just yet. His face hardens with pure determination as he declares that with them watching, he'll finally fuse light and dark to perfect his ultimate original magic. He ascends into the sky as a massive storm of light and shadow explodes around him, leaving Lilith grinning in awe and Mika paralyzed with shock at the result of 18 months of grueling training. The darkness fades as a new day dawns, signaling the relentless march of time. Later on, a crowd of elite guests gathers outside a massive mansion for a high-stakes formal gala. Inside the buzzing grand hall, Weiss struggles to hide a massive yawn as the guests chatter around him. Lilith catches him and scolds him for being rude, asking if he's exhausted from his late-night training, but he just brushes her off with a cool wave. His mind flashes back to that explosion of raw power, remembering that it was in that very moment his ultimate magic was finally born. He stares at his masterpiece, Dark Heal, a forbidden fusion of holy restoration and the lethal, corrosive poison of the abyss. This insane spell automatically mends his allies' wounds while rotting his enemies alive with a relentless, soul-crushing curse. He pulled it off, but the cost was massive, leaving him gasping for air and collapsing onto the dirt in total exhaustion. He admits to Lilith that his mana reserves are bone dry, but she just flashes a wicked grin and promises to bring back some heavy booze to snap him out of it. Before he can even utter a word, she vanishes in a blur of speed, leaving him shouting into the wind at her sudden disappearance. As he scans the rowdy crowd, he can't stop thinking about her movements. She's got the lethal razor-sharp agility of a professional assassin. Suddenly, a mysterious guest catches his eye, reminding him of rumors about the Vincent family's secret guards, until a soft voice whispers his name and makes him spin around. It's her, the same girl from before. And as she turns to face him, her long, shimmering hair flows like a silken waterfall. His heart skips a beat as he recognizes her. Cynthia, the daughter of Countess Violetta, looking absolutely stunning with those piercing red eyes. She flashes him a knowing smirk, and then it hits him like a ton of bricks. This is Cynthia Violetta, the legendary main heroine from his past life's game. She greets him with a radiant, soft smile, calling out his name and remarking on how long it's been since their last meeting. He stares back in total shock, prompting her to tilt her head and playfully mock him, saying he looks like a crushed goblin turned into muddy soup. His mind races as a chilling realization hits him, his hand trembling as he remembers the brutal truth. In this world, everyone absolutely loathes Weiss, and out of everyone who despised him, one person's hatred burned the brightest. In the original story, Cynthia loathed Weiss more than anyone else. Her pure malice was what ended his life, and a gruesome image of his past self surfaces, his body riddled with fatal wounds, all thanks to her. Yet here she is, standing before him with a dazzling, serene smile, making him curse the day he decided to show up just to fulfill his family duties. He curses his rotten luck, wishing he'd skipped this party entirely since he never expected to cross paths with Cynthia before the academy even started. He clutches his head, desperately trying to stay calm, reasoning that in this timeline, he hasn't given her a single reason to hate him yet. But as he fights for control, a dark, foreign sensation surges through him, a twisted echo of the original Weiss and his pure malevolence. The sensation leaves him dazed and disoriented, and Cynthia looks at him with total confusion, repeating her own name as if he'd just said it in the strangest way possible. As Weiss locks eyes with her, a twisted memory from the original plot erupts. His past self cornering Cynthia with a sadistic smirk, weapon drawn, while a single demonic eye watches from the depths of his mind. The vision vanishes, but her icy whisper drags the past into the light as she leans in, declaring she hasn't forgotten a single second of that nightmare. Her words paint a gruesome picture. He used his status to drag her to his room, trying to defile her with his own disgusting hands. Pure hatred burns in her eyes as she spits out the words, calling him nothing but a piece of noble trash. Her venom hits him like a physical blow, and he realizes with pure terror that she wants him dead, cursing the original Weiss for leaving him in this absolute disaster of a situation. With no other choice, he snaps into action, dropping into a deep, desperate bow and begging Lady Cynthia for her forgiveness. The entire party goes silent as he makes a scene, his voice ringing out as he takes full blame for his pathetic, dishonorable actions. Her face flickers at his public display of shame, and while she accepts the apology, she delivers a chilling warning. He's still far from being forgiven. She stares at his bowed head in total shock, never imagining that a man like him would ever swallow his pride like this. She senses he's finally cooled off, while Weiss prays this desperate act of humility is enough to stop his life from spiraling into total ruin. Weiss looked back at the chaos and realized he'd always dreamed of being near Cynthia, his favorite character from the story, but he knew he'd hit his limit and prepared to slip away. He convinced himself they were worlds apart, like light and shadow, destined to never truly meet. A fallen noble like him, chasing a high-born lady, was just begging for disaster. But right as he turned to leave, a hand suddenly clamped onto his arm. To his shock, it was Cynthia, and without saying a single word, she grabbed his hand and dragged him straight through the massive crowd. As they cut through the hall, Lilith Scarlet caught sight of their joined hands and froze in total disbelief, whispering his name under her breath. Cynthia locked eyes with him, her face a complete mystery, before dropping a total bombshell. Would he care to join her for a dance? Weiss stood there paralyzed, his face turning beet red as he struggled to speak, while Lilith's voice desperately called out to him from the background. Now, under a beautiful open sky, Weiss and Cynthia are sharing a peaceful tea time in a garden gazebo as she comments on the gorgeous weather. He nods in agreement, listening to the birds sing while staring out over the massive, sprawling grounds of his family's estate. But as he takes a sip of tea, one burning question shatters the peace. What on earth is Cynthia doing at his house? Let's rewind to the night that changed everything, where Cynthia stands right before him, asking for a dance. He remembers that fateful ball where, against all odds, he was handpicked to dance with the legendary heroine herself. As they moved, she caught his look of confusion and dropped a bombshell. She knew he wasn't the same man anymore. It hit him right then. Cynthia had heard the whispers of his brutal training and his desperate push to enter the academy. Mid-dance, her voice sliced through his mind as she asked if he truly had no memory of that specific day. He stammers out a yes, while his mind races back to that dark incident, leaving him paralyzed with guilt and shock. Snapping back to reality, he lunges forward, yanking Cynthia from her seat and dipping her into a breathtaking high-stakes embrace. With his heart racing, she leans in close and whispers a question that stops his world. Has he forgotten that he once confessed his love to her? He's left absolutely speechless as the crowd erupts in applause, while Cynthia coolly announces the dance is over like nothing happened. She waves a casual goodbye and vanishes, leaving him clutching his chest because that wasn't just a dance. It was the moment she stole his heart and walked away. This memory is burned into his mind, tied forever to his father, Agito Vincent, a man of ice, surrounded by stone-faced guards. Thinking of his old man triggers a flashback to the day a fateful letter arrived at the Vincent estate. The contents sent him into a total spiral, screaming in shock that he had to host a dinner for Cynthia that very day, and the horror peaked when he saw her carriage pulling up. While Lilith and Zevis scrambled to get ready, a dark premonition gripped Weiss, and just like that, we're back in the present, with him and Cynthia sitting in the garden. He seethes with rage, cursing his father under his breath and wondering what kind of twisted game the old man is playing now. He looks at Cynthia, and his heart aches. He's thrilled to be with her, but he knows he can't get close because she's destined for the protagonist, Alan. This realization freezes him in his tracks, terrified that if he steals her heart, the entire timeline will shatter and the fated events with Alan will vanish. Panic surges through him as cold sweat beads on his forehead. If the future shifts, he loses his ultimate weapon, his knowledge of the script. His mind races through the chaos. Even beating Alan in a simple test is risky, but stealing the main heroine would blow the entire story to pieces. Suddenly, Cynthia's voice snaps him back to reality, and he realizes he's walking a razor's edge. Getting too close is just as dangerous as being cast aside. She locks her eyes onto his with an unreadable gaze, reminding him of the day he swore he fell for her at first sight, and she demands to know if he's forgotten his own words. She explains that his first confession felt rushed and way too cocky, but seeing him bow so low in a heartfelt apology has completely changed her tune. Her face flushes a deep crimson as she flashes a playful smile, confessing that maybe, just maybe, she's starting to return his feelings. A thick, suffocating silence hangs over the table as the weight of her words sinks in. His cool exterior completely shatters while his brain screams in absolute, unadulterated panic. This is his worst nightmare. Just as he feared she'd catch feelings, she shows off this incredibly soft side that he never saw coming from such a noble lady. Suddenly, it clicks. He remembers that in the original story, she fell for the hero way too fast. And now, the terrifying truth is finally dawning on him. Cynthia is dangerously soft-hearted, and he knows that once she loses her heart to someone, her devotion becomes an unstoppable obsession. Cold sweat pours down his face in the garden as he desperately tries to think of a way to make her hate him. But Cynthia just lets out a sweet, melodic giggle. Her laughter only fuels his horror. She thinks his awkward silence is adorable, and he can practically see her love meter skyrocketing against his will. His internal panic explodes into a startled yelp as Lilith suddenly appears with the tea, catching Weiss in a state of total, flustered shock. He desperately tries to play it cool, regretting that pathetic sound he just made, but then it hits him. If Cynthia thinks he's a loser, maybe she'll finally leave him alone. Lilith watches Cynthia descend into a total daydream, mumbling about how cute Weiss is, and realizes she has to intervene before this girl loses her mind completely. Later, standing before the massive manor, Cynthia finally breaks the silence to ask why Weiss's father was the one to break the news about today's events. He takes a slow sip of tea and sighs at the reality of this engagement, while Cynthia reveals that even though their parents arranged the dinner, she's officially decided to say yes. Meanwhile, lurking deep within the shadows of the trees, Weiss's father watches with a devious smirk, thinking about what a handful his son has become. His subordinates notice the resemblance, remarking that Weiss is just as handsome as his father, but way too shy, a comment that clearly strikes a nerve with the old man. He's glowing with pride over the engagement, convinced that Weiss was dying for a chance to dance with a high-class lady, so he took charge and settled the matter instantly. His way of doing business is pure madness, as he bellows with laughter while playing in a sandbox, declaring that his brat of a son must be over the moon right now. He barks at his men to stop complaining and help him dig a sand tunnel, claiming he knows exactly what his son wants, while a terrified child nearby watches the bizarre scene in horror. Weiss and Lilith stand before a massive golden manor as Cynthia steps out to greet them. Cynthia is glowing, but Weiss is absolutely horrified, screaming internally at his father for forcing this insane engagement on him. He later breaks the news to Lilith, realizing that simple tea party his dad set up was actually a secret trap to marry him off. This isn't just some boring political deal. His father actually teamed up with the Violettas because he genuinely thought this would make his son happy. It makes no sense. Weiss remembers his dad as a cold, distant ghost, but this version of the man is nothing like the character from the original story. Suddenly, a memory hits him like a truck. His father, grinning ear to ear, while burying him in gifts, proving he wasn't cold. He was a dangerously overindulgent parent. He sees his younger self drowning in a mountain of presents, and the terrifying truth finally clicks. This spoiled upbringing is exactly what turned the original Weiss into a villain. Weiss stands there paralyzed as Lilith speaks up, her voice shaking and her eyes filled with pure heartbreak. Tears pour down her cheeks as she chokes out a plea for him to find happiness with Lady Violetta. Before he can even blink, she bolts away at lightning speed, leaving him shouting after her in total shock. Mika Ayoda suddenly cuts him off, calmly declaring that today's training is simple. he has to hunt down Lilith. Mika demands to know if he understands Lilith's tears, reminding him that the man she served for 18 months was just snatched away by another girl, and she won't let him ignore the heartbreak he's caused. Her command is absolute: drag Lilith back to the mansion immediately, or face a brutal execution. He roars his agreement and takes off like a shot as the truth finally hits him. Lilith has always been by his side, and he owes her a debt he can never truly repay. As he pushes his body to the limit, he realizes that without her constant support, he'd still be the same lazy, pathetic loser he used to be. He begs her to wait, but she screams for him to stay away, blasting him back with a massive wave of raw power that leaves him struggling to keep up. They tear through dense forests and across rushing rivers as he screams her name, but she just brushes him off, insisting that her feelings don't matter because she's just a servant. She continues her desperate flight across the estate grounds while his voice echoes behind her, shouting that she's far more than just a maid. She's the most precious person in his life. He lunges through the trees, desperately explaining that the engagement was his father's choice, not his, before asking if she knows the secret rules of the Noble Academy. He reveals that at the Elite Magic Academy, high-ranking nobles can bring one special servant, and he's choosing her because she's the only one he trusts, leaving Lilith frozen in shock as the weight of his words sinks in. She glances back from the endless stairs, demanding to know if he's really chasing her, and when he gasps out a desperate yes, she bolts ahead with a wild challenge. Will you hunt me down forever? His muscles are on fire and he's seconds from blacking out, but he lets out a primal roar of defiance that makes her smirk with pure satisfaction. Reaching the summit, her cold gaze finally softens as she admits that if he's this obsessed, she's finally ready to give in. Standing right on the edge of a jagged cliff, she drops a total bombshell. From this second on, she belongs to him as his mistress. He's frozen in shock, but before he can even blink, she leans back into the empty air, and without thinking, he screams her name and dives straight into the abyss after her. The two of them are free-falling through the sky, hurtling toward the roaring river at the bottom of the massive canyon. Mid-air, she snatches him into a tight embrace, whispering for him to relax because their scandalous new secret is safe with her. With the wind howling and her cheeks flushing red, she asks if this is their secret love, leaving Scott absolutely speechless as they scream toward the water. His brain short-circuits just as they slam into the river, triggering a colossal explosion of water that shoots toward the heavens. As the splash forms a fleeting heart in the air, everything changes, because this wild affair with Lilith is exactly what leads Weiss straight into an engagement with Cynthia. Out in a jagged clearing, Alan stares down a lonely cabin, his eyes burning with a grim, unshakable resolve. He glares toward the cave where the other candidates are swarming, wondering if the game's original hero is actually ready for the hell that's about to break loose. Back at the training grounds, Mika locks a cold stare on Cynthia, demanding to know if she really thinks that pathetic spark of magic is enough. Cynthia's face is bright red from the strain, but she snaps back at Milk Sensei, swearing she can push her power even further beyond. The instructor pivots to Lilith, barking orders to dial back the output and find her balance, and a struggling Lilith gasps out her understanding. Watching the chaos from the sidelines, Vice Vincent stands like a statue, his face a complete mystery. Mika watches this insane training session unfold, losing her mind, as Weiss's fiancé and his mistress train side by side with orbs of light. It's a total mess that Cynthia is still trying to wrap her head around. She's engaged to one person while being Lilith's secret lover. This tangled web of romance is driving Mika crazy, and from where she's standing, the whole situation is just pure, unadulterated madness. Weiss is feeling the absurdity too, sending a sarcastic thanks to his father for this disaster and promising to tear him a new one the second he gets back. Mika decides the warm-up is officially over, smirking as she grips her wooden staff and prepares for real combat. She demands to know if they've ever actually fought. Lilith answers with total confidence, while a stunned Cynthia eventually manages a hesitant nod. As if things weren't messy enough, Weiss realizes both Lilith and Cynthia have officially joined Mika's brutal training regime. Their goal is clear. They're both training like demons to crush the Academy's entrance exam in just a few months. Cynthia is a total natural who could pass the test in her sleep, so this training is just about turning her into a perfect weapon. Lilith is a different story. She was meant to be a simple attendant, but she insisted on fighting her way through the exam right by Weiss's side. Neither of them actually needs this hellish training, and Weiss realizes that if Cynthia keeps this up, she'll become a monster compared to her original self. The girls stand ready in the clearing while Weiss white-knuckles his training sword, his nerves absolutely shot. Mika breaks the silence, pointing directly at Weiss and declaring that his first opponent is none other than Cynthia. Lilith cheers him on while Cynthia teases him, but Mika shuts it down, warning Weiss not to hold back just because he's fighting his own fiancée. With a sharp command, she orders them to square off, and Weiss and Cynthia step onto the field, gripping their training swords tight. She looks Weiss in the eye, trusting him to know exactly what to do without a single word, leaving him standing there completely lost. He tries to protest, but before he can even open his mouth, Cynthia rockets into the air with her wooden blade poised to strike. The blow comes fast, but he parries just in time, the heavy clang of wood sending dust flying as Mika and Lilith watch the duel unfold. As their swords lock, Mika's voice rings in his head about the importance of the first move, just as Cynthia smirks and vanishes into thin air. His heart races as he senses her behind him, spinning around just in time to block another strike as she reappears out of nowhere. This insane speed is all thanks to her ice magic, letting her glide across the battlefield like she's skating on thin air. She uses that momentum to hammer his blind spots, forcing him to grunt in pain as he struggles to keep up with her relentless assault. But her aggression leaves a gap, and as she lunges, he deftly sidesteps and slams the flat of his blade right onto her head with a heavy thud. The hit shuts her down instantly, and as Cynthia whimpers in pain, Weiss panics until Mika finally shouts for them to stop. Mika breaks it down for a panicked Weiss. Since he swung while Cynthia was blitzing him, his gentle tap turned into a devastating counterstrike. Cynthia doesn't even care about the pain. She's drowning in pure frustration as tears sting her eyes because she's never been dodged this effortlessly in her entire life. Nursing a massive knot on her head, Cynthia fumes while Lilith works her healing magic, grumbling a bitter "no problem" when Mika tries to thank her. Mika zeroes in on Weiss, demanding to know how he tracked Cynthia's insane speed. But the boy just stares back with a completely blank expression. She shakes off the confusion, deciding there's only one way to find out if that win was a total fluke or the result of hidden, god-tier skill. Without missing a beat, she drops a bombshell. Weiss's next opponent is none other than the maid, Lilith. Weiss is losing his mind, terrified to jump back into the ring, but Lilith shuts him down instantly, mocking him from behind to quit his whining. Trembling, he squares up against Lilith, with training swords in hand, stammering out a reply as Mika and Cynthia watch the tension rise. Doubt floods his mind as he stares her down, trying to convince himself she's just a simple maid. But he knows he's dead wrong. His memories hit him like a freight train, reminding him of the terrifying, superhuman agility he's seen her display time and time again. His memories snap into a grim reality, and he realizes one thing: a single mistake here means instant death. Before he can even think, Lilith explodes into motion, her blade carving craters into the earth as the onlookers freeze in pure terror. He barely deflects the brutal assault, his wooden sword trembling as he fights for his life against her blinding velocity. Lilith flashes a wicked grin as she realizes he can actually keep up, confirming to everyone watching that his insane reaction speed is no fluke. He's losing his mind because this wasn't in the script. Lilith was supposed to be a nobody, not a monster with this kind of overwhelming power. Cynthia analyzes the chaos, horrified to find that this magic novice is already faster than her and a lethal expert with the sword. The crushing pressure forces Weiss to stop holding back, and suddenly a sinister dark energy begins to gather above him. He triggers his spell, Dark Heal, and a massive shadowy magic circle swallows the entire arena in an instant. Cynthia knows this move. It's Weiss's signature magic that mends his allies' wounds while devouring his enemies with a lethal curse. Her survival instinct screams at her to flee the circle, but a sudden, shocking realization stops her dead in her tracks. She realizes the deadly cost. To unleash that massive spell, Weiss had to ditch his sword, leaving him completely wide open. Lilith doesn't hesitate for a second, blitzing across the arena toward her defenseless master while he's pinned to the ground. She lunges like a lightning bolt, but Weiss stands firm with a cocky grin, ready to seize his one and only chance at victory. He blocks her lethal strike with nothing but a wooden cane, and the massive shockwave sends Lilith reeling through the air. A glowing hexagonal shield shimmers around him, and Weiss smiles, seeing that she's finally stopped holding back. He reveals his ultimate trump card, the Absolute Barrier, a terrifying fusion of dark and light magic. But he's just getting started, activating his legendary signature ability, the Dark Eye. He's invincible. Between his future-seeing eye and that barrier, he can tank her godlike speed as long as his mana holds out. Mika watches from the sidelines with bated breath, wondering if this is really the limit of Lilith's true power. Suddenly, a panicked scream rips through the air, ordering Weiss to shut down his magic before it's too late. He glanced back at his rival only to see Lilith wobbling violently, her balance completely gone as the world started to spin. She crashed to the earth before he could even move, sending him into a panic as he screamed her name. He stood over the quiet battlefield as Cynthia knelt beside the fallen Lilith and announced his total defeat. Mika sprinted over to help, swearing her top-tier potion would save her, while a shaken Weiss begged for confirmation that she'd survive. Cynthia's focus snapped to Weiss as she demanded to know his secret, stunned that a warrior like Lilith was neutralized in mere seconds. He revealed the name of his art, Dark Heal, a spell that triggers the instant an enemy enters his domain. But Mika was hungry for more details. He broke it down. The spell is a debuffing nightmare that guts your strength, saps your life, steals your mana, and destroys your speed and defense. Every single curse hits at the exact same moment, and because Lilith's mana was low, the sudden drain simply forced her body to give up. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. As he revealed his true power, he absorbs every stat he steals, turning his enemy's strength into his own. With a bold grin, he explained that more enemies only fuel his power, and he can even share those massive stat boosts with his allies. The crowd was absolutely floored, as Mika, Cynthia, and the other student could only gape at him in pure, unadulterated shock. As they realized the terrifying scope of his power, Weiss's eyes flared with a wild, manic intensity that sent shivers down their spines. His heart hammered against his ribs as sweat poured down his face, wondering if he'd picked the worst possible moment to drop such a bombshell. His brain scrambled for an excuse, but he couldn't resist. This was the legendary line every isekai protagonist dreams of saying, and he was going for it. But before he could open his mouth, Mika shut him down with a cold challenge, ignoring his weary sighs as she demanded a duel right then and there. A suffocating dark aura exploded from Mika as she acknowledged his growth with a deadly tone, while Weiss just watched her with a cryptic smirk. She slammed her fist down, screaming that she hadn't felt this fired up in ages, and now Weiss had to use his new powers to survive her wrath. The hellish training kicked off, with Cynthia and Lilith watching in horror as Mika's strikes carved massive craters into the earth, with Weiss buried headfirst inside them. Months of brutal Spartan training blurred together, yet the awkward tension between them never faded, leaving Weiss constantly on edge around his team. At long last, the torture ended, and Weiss stood before the massive gates of the academy with his allies, ready to finally make his move. They finally reached the legendary Noblesse Magic Academy for the entrance exam, and right there in the crowd stands the game's hero, Alan. Their fates are about to collide. The massive, prestigious grounds of the academy sit silent under the morning sun, with its towering central spire radiating pure authority. This is the biggest, most elite school in the entire kingdom, and as the courtyard swarms with nervous applicants, a massive brute suddenly corners a younger student, screaming at him for staring. He singles out Alan, who stammers that he was just blown away by the guy's sheer size, but the thug takes it as a total insult. The brute's face twists with fury as he winds up for a punch, but suddenly, an iron grip catches his wrist mid-air. It's the light-haired Weiss Vincent, shutting him down instantly. The giant howls in pain, demanding to know who's interfering. But as Weiss steps into the light, the crowd freezes in terror, whispering the name of the most infamous, cruel noble in existence. Rumors fly as students notice Weiss arrived with two stunning girls, and when they spot Lady Cynthia of House Violetta, everyone realizes the engagement rumors are 100% real. The brute's face turns ghostly white as his rage evaporates into pure horror, stammering out the name of the villainous noble he fears most, Weiss Vincent. He drops to his knees, begging for mercy and apologizing like a coward, but Weiss just looks down with ice-cold eyes and tells the pathetic loser to get lost. As the terrified man scurries away, Weiss realizes that even after his reincarnation, his reputation as a monster is still very much alive. 2 grueling years of training have finally passed, and he's determined to act friendly to flip the script on his reputation. He stands before the massive Noblesse Magic Academy as the entrance exam finally begins, fueled by a burning desire to crush his rival. But then, the very boy he just rescued stammers out his thanks, and Weiss realizes this is the man he has to surpass. Completely oblivious to the intense pressure, the young man reaches out for a handshake and introduces himself as Alan. Alan recognizes the noble as Weiss and flashes a bright grin, wishing them both luck. But Weiss remains a wall of cold silence. He keeps a stone-cold expression, but deep down he's actually hoping they both crush this exam. Alan's hand stays extended, a silent invitation hanging awkwardly in the air between them. Suddenly, a piercing bell shatters the moment as officials signal the start of the test. Cynthia tells Weiss it's time to move, while Alan's friend drags him away before they're late. Before they vanish, Alan's childhood friend, Cheryl Elias, turns back to Weiss and gives him a heartfelt thanks for saving Alan's life. Cheryl and Alan sprint off to find their friend Duke, leaving Weiss standing alone as a chilling, unsettling feeling creeps up his spine. It hits him like a lightning bolt. He actually hesitated to take Alan's hand. He just couldn't shake it. Why did a simple chat with Alan leave him drowning in such a sickening sense of dread right at the academy gates? Standing before the official, he sharpened his strategy, reminding himself he didn't hate Alan. He just had to destroy him in this test. His original plan was simple: win the fight, then keep things friendly but strictly professional. But when the official announced the practical combat stage, his heart hammered against his ribs as they donned reinforced hand-me-down uniforms built to withstand lethal magic. Decked out in striking black and white combat gear, Weiss stood firm with Cynthia and Cheryl, bracing for the coming storm. Out of nowhere, Alan's voice pierced the silence, dripping with pure malice as he vowed to utterly break his opponent. That threat triggered a horrifying darkness within Weiss, a primal urge that screamed for him to crush every single soul in the arena. As he grappled with this sudden violent hunger, the proctor laid out the win conditions: knockout or surrender, leaving Weiss to wonder what kind of monster he was becoming. The proctor finished the rules, offering to intervene if things got too bloody, when a hulking student suddenly demanded attention. A student named Duke started griping about his tiny, stinking uniform, causing the proctor to snap back and wonder if these massive kids were actually only 15 years old. Alan roars at Duke to hang in there, promising him a fresh, custom-fit uniform if he survives. He screams for him to get out there and crush him. Nearby, two girls watch the chaos, shocked that the school has enough uniforms for every recruit. But Cynthia Violetta drops a truth bomb. Those clothes only exist because so many students quit and vanish. She flashes a dark smirk, warning that the massive pile of gear proves just how brutal this academy really is. Behind them, Weiss Vincent catches every word, his face twisted in pure irritation. Noblesse Academy is the kingdom's most elite and ruthless slaughterhouse for students. Their standards are legendary. If you slip up for even a second, you're expelled instantly. The training is so savage that some recruits don't even make it out alive. Those lucky enough to escape throw their uniforms away, desperate to forget the nightmare they endured. Weiss scoffs at the thought, knowing from the original plot that getting in is the easy part. He remembers even the laziest loser in history managed to scrape through this exam. Suddenly the sky breaks and rain pours down, but Weiss doesn't even flinch. He stands like a statue, his gaze turning cold as ice. The proctor's voice booms through the hall, announcing the next clash. Number 907 Alan versus number 909 Weiss Vincent. Alan's head snaps up as his name echoes through the arena. Their eyes lock across the crowded room in a tense standoff. Alan looks stunned, but Weiss stares back with a chilling, emotionless glare. The heavens open up into a violent storm as they gear up for battle. The officials don't care about the weather, barking orders for everyone else to clear the field and get to the stands. The storm can't stop this showdown as Alan and Weiss face off in the center of a massive, rain-drenched arena with their blades ready for blood. Standing on the grid, a bizarre phenomenon shocks the crowd. While rain pours everywhere else, the dueling ground stays completely dry. Alan ignores the weather and flashes a cocky grin, telling Weiss he's hyped for this fight and warning him he better not dare lose. Weiss stays dead silent with a face like stone, even as a fan screams from the bleachers for Lord Weiss to give it his all. The referee raises his hand high, signals the start of the mock battle, and roars the command to begin. Instantly, Weiss explodes forward with blinding speed, slamming into Alan with a brutal downward slash that sends him reeling. Instead of following up, Weiss stomps his foot and triggers his dark heel technique, sending a pulse of pure shadow rippling across the floor. Alan screams in pure agony as the dark energy consumes him, leaving Cynthia and the girls watching in absolute terror. Weiss turns his back on his writhing opponent, cursing under his breath because that attack didn't pack the punch he wanted. A terrifying aura leaks from Weiss as he walks away with a twisted grin, fueled by a sick urge to destroy his rival, while a student in the crowd gasps for air under the sheer weight of his bloodlust. Weiss's inner demon finally snaps, a twisted shadow looming over Alan's broken body, while the horrified crowd watches the monster bare its fangs. Once the dust settled on the Grand Academy entrance exams, The faculty immediately scrambled for an emergency meeting. Inside a grand office, the headmaster sat at a massive table, staring down his guests and demanding to know what they did to Weiss. He was grilling Zevis, the family butler, and the legendary S-ranker Mika, but both of them stayed dead silent, lost in thought. The headmaster turned to his staff, wondering aloud how Weiss Vincent could have pulled off such an impossible feat. This kid didn't just pass. He shattered every single record in academy history, standing victorious and smirking through his own blood. Gills, the leader of the Noblesse Magic Academy, turned his focus back to the two people who raised Weiss, demanding a direct answer. He leaned in with a deadly serious expression, demanding their honest opinion on a boy with such dangerous abilities. But before they could answer, an instructor named Darius stepped forward, respectfully asking the headmaster for a quick word. Darius stepped up with a crucial clarification, noting that while Weiss's scores were the highest ever, he hadn't technically broken. Gills suddenly remembers a massive detail, asking Darius if he forgot that Weiss actually tied for first place with a mysterious girl last year. He grills the staff about Weiss's training, but Mika claims she did nothing special, while Zevis insists he just kept the boy fed, leaving the headmaster completely stunned. Zebus doubles down, claiming he just gave Weiss plenty of protein, while a memory of a battered but smiling Weiss flashes before them. He reveals the secret diet, a mountain of soy, dairy, and chicken tenders, all washed down with a side of milk. Darius loses it, slamming his fist down and roaring that it's impossible for someone to master 4 elements and light and dark magic just by eating chicken. As the room heats up, Mika starts chugging from a massive wooden mug, mumbling that she's speechless, while a frustrated Darius demands to know why she's drinking right now. The alcohol hits her like a truck, and she slumps over the table, leaving Zevis to mock her while Darius fumes over who would give her booze in front of the boss. The headmaster tells Darius to quiet down, noting Mika's always been a disaster, but his knuckles turn white as he mutters how cruel this is for the boy. A haunting memory surfaces of a rainy night where Weiss knelt desperately supports a dying Alan, whose sword lies abandoned in the dirt. He remembers the grim reality of that moment under the pouring rain, the terrifying fact that Alan had nearly lost his life. That memory ignites a fire in his soul, and as the rain pours down, Weiss wears a chilling smirk. Meanwhile, Darius is losing his mind in the office, screaming at an unconscious Mika that Alan was his masterpiece, and she wouldn't last a second on a real battlefield. Darius grinds his teeth in pure fury, while Mika leans in with a mocking grin, calling his jealousy pathetic and mocking him for taking his recent defeat out on everyone else. Exploding with rage, Darius points a finger at the kneeling Zevis and screams that Mika failed to control Weiss, but Headmaster Gills shuts them both down with a single, thunderous command. Still on the floor, Zevis looks the headmaster in the eye and calmly promises that despite the chaos surrounding Weiss's enrollment, there is absolutely nothing to fear. The headmaster leans back in his massive throne, weighing the words before declaring with total confidence that Weiss would never dream of crushing someone weaker than himself. Leaving the drama behind, Weiss strides away with Lilith and Cynthia by his side, and everyone can feel it. He's not the same person anymore. Instead of letting his godlike power go to his head, he's pouring every ounce of effort into becoming a true warrior of courage, while Lilith and Cynthia proudly clutch their own acceptance letters. The three of them share a triumphant smile as they march through the gates, knowing their place at the academy is finally set in stone. They stand before the towering, majestic main building of the Noble Magic Academy, just as a booming voice commands the attention of every student in sight. Inside the massive lecture hall, a sharp woman with dark hair and glasses welcomes the new recruits, introducing herself as Chloe, the instructor who's going to be running their lives from now on. Chloe steps up to welcome the class, and the room is a powder keg of emotions. Weiss smirks like he knows a secret, Cynthia is locked in, and the rest of the students, including that beefy guy from the exam, are shaking with nerves and excitement. She officially welcomes them to the Noblesse Magic Academy, but Weiss Vincent isn't smiling. He stands there stone-faced, flanked by Cynthia and Lilith, as they eye their new teacher with total suspicion. Weiss scans the room, his eyes locking onto the other students before stopping dead on Alan, who's sitting there with his head hanging low. Suddenly, Alan looks up, a cocky smirk spreading across his face as he stares Weiss right in the eyes. Seeing that face triggers a flashback to the entrance exam, reminding Weiss of the day he absolutely crushed Alan in combat. He remembers losing control and nearly beating Alan to a pulp, but no matter how hard he hit him, the guy just refused to stay down. It was insane. Every time Alan took a hit, he seemed to get even stronger, his willpower burning like a wildfire. Weiss walked away with a massive victory, but taking Alan out took way more effort than he ever imagined. As Weiss dwells on what it really means to be the main character, a loud snap of his teacher's fingers jolts him back to reality. She points to their hands, and Weiss gasps as a mysterious, glowing sigil begins to burn right into his skin. The instructor raises a shimmering token, revealing that every single student has just been gifted a massive 1,000 points. She pushes up her glasses, warning them that these points will track their every move until graduation, leaving the class buzzing with frantic questions. She slams the number 1,000 onto the chalkboard, declaring that everyone is equal, except for one person, Weisswitz. He looks down at his hand in shock as his glowing sigil burns with 2,000 points, a reward for his insane test scores. The room explodes into pure chaos as the students scream in disbelief, unable to wrap their heads around that massive 2,000-point lead. Weisswitz steps up, demanding to know if these are just grades, worried that having double the points is totally unfair to his classmates. The entire class demands answers, desperate to know the true purpose of these points, while the instructor watches them with a cold, calculating silence. She tosses the explanation aside, deciding that words are useless and that they'll only learn the truth through a baptism of fire. She barks out an order for everyone to grab a wooden sword and get to the training grounds, leaving the students trembling with fear and confusion. They step out under a massive, storm-tossed sky, where the stage is finally set for their brutal first lesson. The students gather on the training grounds as their instructor's voice cuts through the air like a blade, warning them that graduation is a privilege, not a promise, and their first combat test starts right now. The stakes are lethal. If your points hit 0, you're expelled instantly. A wave of pure terror washes over the crowd, and the sound of a sharp gasp echoes as the weight of her words sinks in. Today, they fight until someone is broken, and their points are drained to nothing. In the heavy, suffocating silence, Weiss Vincent narrows his eyes, his jaw locked in a mask of pure, grim determination. Miles away, Mika Oda stands over a pile of defeated thugs, completely unfazed, as one begs for mercy at her feet. Sipping from a wooden mug, she sighs at how boring life has become since Weiss left, and a dangerous new plan begins to take shape. She figures she'll kill some time by snagging a teaching license at Noblesse Magic Academy. A sly, knowing smirk plays on her lips as she looks toward the school, sensing a massive storm is about to erupt. A cocky student named Louis Mycent struts up to Weiss, showering him with praise for crushing the mock battle with the top score. But Cynthia and her friend aren't having it, radiating a freezing aura that tells him to back off immediately. Louis was supposed to be the golden boy, a genius destined to rule the class. But that dream is dead now as he collapses in the dirt, his bright future shattered into a million pieces. Instructor Chloe towers over him, thrusting a device in his face that displays a cold, hard 0. She glares down at the broken boy, demanding to know if he's deaf to the sound of his own failure. The verdict booms across the field like a death sentence. Louis Mycen is expelled. He stays pinned to the ground, bloodied and shell-shocked, while Alan stands behind him like a silent, unmoving shadow. From the sidelines, Weiss watches the carnage, a single bead of sweat rolling down his face. The image of Louis's tear-stained, broken expression burns into his mind as the brutal reality of this school finally hits home. The truth is staggering. Louis was absolutely annihilated by Alan. The victor, though battered and bruised, wipes the blood from his lip with a look of pure, cold steel. Later, the Academy's grand dining hall is ghost town quiet. Weiss and Cynthia's group huddle at one end, while Alan sits in total isolation, miles away from everyone else. Weiss glares at his tray as his appetite vanishes into thin air. He slams his fist down in pure frustration, his mind racing as he tries to figure out his next move. He thinks back to his master plan. He was supposed to follow the script and keep the original story on track by only doing what was absolutely necessary. But now, everything is ruined because the main heroine, Cynthia Violetta, is somehow his fiancée. While he's drowning in despair, she just smiles and talks about how good the food tastes, totally clueless. His head spins, and sweat pours down his face as his world descends into madness. Louis was supposed to stay until graduation, but instead, he got kicked out on the very first day. Even worse than the chaos outside is the darkness bubbling up from within. The original Weiss's twisted emotions are starting to take over. This pressure has been exploding ever since he met Alan, with his inner villain screaming at him to lash out and destroy everyone in his path. His grip tightens, snapping a metal spoon as pure malice surges through him. He was supposed to play the nice guy to earn their trust, but now he just wants to crush them into the dirt. He fights the urge with everything he's got, knowing that if he snaps now, he'll end up as the most hated man in history, just like the original story predicted. Right as his dark thoughts began to spiral, a calm voice sliced through the noise, asking if he really planned to crush every single one of them. It was Cynthia Violetta, and with a peaceful smile, she told him she was totally down for it, if that's what he truly wanted. Her total lack of fear left him completely stunned, wondering why she wasn't freaking out. Dazed, he handed back his tray and managed a quick thanks to the chef. While he stood there, frozen in shock, she reminded him that at the Noblesse Magic Academy, ruthless thoughts like his were actually par for the course. She looked at him with deep concern, admitting she'd been worried because, in the past, he'd always been way too soft and kind for his own good. She pushed further, declaring that in a world where you either crush or get crushed, mercy is a death sentence. And after seeing his power in the test, she's seeing him in a whole new light. As he processed her words, she turned down more food and looked him dead in the eye, swearing to be just as ruthless to survive this cutthroat world, before flashing a bright smile and promising to support him no matter what. The chef's offer faded into the background as Cynthia declined, but Weiss's mind was already miles away, whispering one name to himself: Lilith. He snapped back to reality as she gripped his shoulder, telling him firmly that as her fiancé, he needs the killer instinct to annihilate every single rival in his path. A faint blush crept onto his face as he looked at Cynthia and her friend, and he gave them both a quiet, sincere thank you. A thoughtful smile creeps across his face as he replays their words, realizing that while he can't change his mind instantly, this talk finally cleared the fog in his head. Suddenly, the student calls out to Weiss Summer with a wild idea. She holds out a coin and suggests letting a simple toss decide his entire fate. He grabs the coin, a smirk returning to his lips as the idea clicks. If he can't choose, he'll let destiny take the wheel. With his thumb poised to flip, he realizes the original plan is already in ruins, leaving his future a complete and total mystery. His face hardens with pure resolve as he shuts down his racing thoughts, choosing to let this one coin flip settle it all. The weight of the moment is crushing, especially as the tearful chef who cooked his meal practically begs him to follow the path set before him. The coin rockets into the air, carving a silver arc through the sky, while Cynthia and the others watch with bated breath. It hits the polished floor and spins like a whirlwind, the ringing sound matching his racing heartbeat as he and the chef stare in total shock. This isn't just any coin. The front shows the majestic kingdom castle, while the back features a legendary dragon, the ultimate symbol of power. The stakes are set. If it lands on heads, he'll crush his dark impulses, escape his doom, and finally try to play nice with Alan. But if it landed on tails, his eyes narrowed into a cold glare as he weighed the dark path ahead. Before the coin could even land, he stomped his foot down, crushing the metal and sealing his destiny right then and there. Later at the academy, Alan walks up in a crisp white uniform and holds out that same coin, smiling as he tells Weiss he dropped it and apologizing for the delay since he was busy recovering and enrolling. With a look of pure sincerity, Alan admits he's just thrilled because he's been dying to see his old friend again. Weiss stares back with a frozen expression, thinking to himself that Alan has it all wrong. It's not about a reunion, it's about the burning desire to clash in battle once more. He locks his fingers together, a sinister smirk creeping across his face as he finally makes his choice. With unshakable resolve, he opens his palm to reveal the dragon insignia facing up, boldly declaring that he feels exactly the same way. Over in the dining hall, Alan is busy asking for seconds while Weiss watches him from the shadows with a completely unreadable gaze. Suddenly, we're in the combat arena where Weiss unleashes a devastating blast of energy, sending Chris Schlegel flying through the air until instructor Chloe finally calls the match. Sprawled out in the wreckage of a broken magic circle, Chris Schlegel is crushed to hear the final verdict. She's officially expelled. The massive Gustav Gregorio bellows a war cry, his face twisting in agony as he lunges forward with every ounce of his strength. Weiss meets the charge with cold, lethal precision, slamming a blow into Gustav's chest that sends him flying into the trees before announcing his total expulsion. His path of destruction is absolute as he tears through the competition, tossing aside nobodies like Karuna and Lehman without even remembering their names. Cynthia and Lilith finally track him down, shocked that he's already purged 6 more rivals, but Weiss just barks out orders for them to flank the enemy and draw their fire. As they move out, a wicked grin spreads across Weiss's face, knowing he owes this new, ruthless version of himself entirely to Alan. Weiss corners Alan with a predatory smirk, vowing to shatter his rival and rip this whole exam to shreds while their worried teams watch the tension explode. While the battlefield burns, a lone girl sits trembling in the moonlight of her dorm room, a broken soul trapped within the academy's cold, silent walls. She stares at the number 22 on her device, remembering her promise to Kada to stay strong, even as she silently screams for a savior before her time at the academy runs out. The victory flag flies high for Team Weiss as he towers over a gasping, defeated Alan, their eyes locking in a final clash of pure, unyielding will. A full month of this carnage has already claimed 10 victims, and Weiss shows no signs of stopping as he dives through the air to crush yet another screaming opponent. He smirks through the sweat, knowing he personally crushed 7 of those 10 dropouts. The drills end and the students swarm the bulletin board, whispering in shock as they check the rankings for defense, tracking, and stealth. Disbelief ripples through the crowd as one name dominates every single category. Weiss Vincent has taken first place. From the shadows of his seat, his razor-sharp eyes scan the entire classroom. This insane display of power makes a classmate snap, pointing an accusing finger and screaming to know if Weiss is living a second life. Duke Billion, Cheryl's childhood friend, explodes, demanding to know what hellish training Weiss did to ghost through Cheryl's magic threads like they were nothing. He rants about how Weiss flattened Alan in a heartbeat and snatched the flag, banking a massive 5,700 points to secure the top spot by a landslide. Duke's voice thunders as he questions how much karma Weiss must have farmed in a past life, while Cheryl snaps at him to shut his loud mouth, and he, after another crushing mock battle, a defeated Alan hangs his head and apologizes to his team for losing to Weiss yet again. Cheryl tells him to shake it off and focus on the next win, but she can't help but burn a hole through Weiss with a lethal glare as he sits there in silence. He shuts his eyes tight, a single bead of sweat rolling down his temple as he tries to lie to himself that everything is under control. He thinks back to his old self, a man who used filthy, underhanded schemes to vent his spite until everyone grew to loathe him. But the current him is a changed man, standing with a clean conscience and choosing to settle his grudges in the heat of a fair fight. Yet his inner fire leaks out as a terrifying aura, leaving Cheryl trembling in pure shock, while Weiss begs her to stop staring. Later, Instructor Chloe confronts a student in a private room while Weiss lingers by the door, his heart heavy with concern. She delivers a cold-blooded warning to Carter: fail to score in the next exam and the consequences will be devastating. Cardi Viola looks up with hollow, somber eyes, quietly whispering that she understands and that she's doing just fine. Chloe shuts her down instantly, snapping that she never asked how she felt, while Weiss watches the tension escalate from the shadows. He remembers the original story where Carter's best friend was her only motivation, even though she was destined to be kicked out of school. But he's completely derailed the plot, because his victory just got her best friend expelled, leaving Carter's fate hanging by a thread. The crushing weight of reality hit him hard as he imagined Carter slinking away from the academy, a total failure with nothing to show for her time. While Carter sat in isolation, two bullies cornered her, sneering as they demanded to know how she planned to survive the next exam. They kept twisting the knife, reminding her with smug grins that this was a tag-team battle, and laughing because she didn't have a single soul to partner with. Carter's face went pale as they took a cheap shot at her annoying best friend, mocking the fact that she'd already been kicked out of school. Their cruel laughter echoed through the air as they tore her dignity to shreds. They couldn't stop laughing at how Weiss had absolutely destroyed her, wondering how anyone could be pathetic enough to lose every single point in one match, unaware that Weiss himself was watching from the shadows. Their insults died in their throats the moment they spotted him, and as one bully gasped his name in terror, Carter looked up, her eyes wide with total shock. After the bullies scattered, Weiss Vincent stepped forward and dropped a bombshell, asking Carter Viola to be his partner for the upcoming exam. The two of them stood high atop a jagged cliff, looking down at the massive academy stretching out below them. Her voice shook with disbelief as she finally spoke, asking why a powerhouse like Weiss would ever want to team up with a loser like her. She couldn't believe it. She was a failing student on the brink of expulsion, while he was the academy's undisputed #1. She started to mention his fiancée Cynthia, but the words died in her throat as her eyes went wide with pure terror. Her trembling gaze locked onto a chilling, dark silhouette lurking right at the edge of the forest. He sensed her sudden panic and asked what was wrong, just as Cynthia Violetta stepped forward, radiating a terrifying, murderous aura. But he didn't even flinch, a cocky smirk spreading across his face as he asked if she was actually worried about his fiancée. He promised that Cynthia only cared about him being the best, and she'd know this partnership was just a cold, calculated move for victory. He even remembered her fierce command to crush everyone in his path. His words didn't help at all. Carter could still feel that suffocating bloodlust. But Weiss snapped her name, demanding she focus. He looked away with ice-cold eyes, making it clear he wasn't doing this to be a hero. He didn't have a second to waste feeling sorry for some failing student. He explained that losing her talent would be a total waste, while Carter stood there dazed, wondering if that terrifying encounter with Cynthia was even real. From across the clearing, he gave her a rare compliment, admitting her flight magic was actually incredible. He pointed out that even elite mages struggle with that level of control, and it would be a tragedy for a talent like hers to go to waste. He knew teaming up with her was the ultimate shortcut to victory, and as Carter hid behind a tree, Cynthia revealed that Weiss was only after her insane special ability. Carter spun around to find Cynthia looming over her with a cocky grin, pinning her against the tree as cold sweat poured down her face. With a piercing gaze, Cynthia praised Carter for her terrifyingly sharp ability to sense everything around her. She wondered if Carter's talent for sniffing out traces of magic was even more powerful than Weiss's legendary dark eye skill. But then she dropped a bombshell. Despite those senses, Carter hadn't even noticed Lilith, the master of assassination, lurking nearby, causing her to scream in shock. Cynthia dropped the real news. The upcoming tag battle is a brutal joint exam where every single grade level is going to war. She explained that Weiss's master plan depends entirely on a partner with a unique gift like Carter's, rather than just picking another powerhouse who can already handle the upperclassmen. Then came the twist. Cynthia is teaming up with Lilith, leaving a stunned Carter with no choice but to partner with Weiss. The mere thought sent Carter into a total spiral of panic as Cynthia's words hammered against her brain. Meanwhile, Weiss stood in a wasteland of a training ground, his mind set. He's choosing Carter, and their hellish training starts right now. He stands over her with a gaze that could pierce steel, while Carter grips her staff tight, trembling under the crushing weight of the moment. With the high-stakes exam looming, their brutal training kicks off, pushing Carter so hard she's fighting back tears with a desperate, shaky smile. As they trek through the dense woods, Weiss brags about his progress, claiming he's finally cracking the code on the notoriously difficult art of flight magic. Carter, a true master of the skies, just gives him a smirk and shuts him down, reminding him that he can barely stay airborne for 2 measly seconds. As they approach a massive building in the distance, Weiss admits she's right, noting that since she'll be carrying him during the exam, he doesn't technically need to learn it yet. But then, his eyes flash with pure ambition as he declares that he's not passing up this golden chance to master a new power. He knows that any spell can be a deadly weapon in the right hands, and since he's standing next to a pro like Carter, he'd be a fool not to learn from her. He gives a respectful bow, apologizing for dragging her into his personal training, but he just couldn't ignore her incredible expertise. His face hardens with ironclad resolve as he makes a solemn vow. If she helps him, he'll make damn sure she survives tomorrow's exam without getting expelled. He doubles down on his promise, asking if she'll keep training him long after the exam ends, leaving Carter stunned by the sheer weight of his words. She lets out a soft laugh, covering her mouth as the truth finally hits her. Every nasty rumor she's heard about this guy is a total lie. Her face lights up with a real smile, stunned by Weiss's incredible work ethic, and she happily accepts his request with a new sense of respect. Gripping her staff tight, she looks him in the eye and officially takes the job, promising to be the best tutor he could ever ask for. While he smiles back, she can't help but think about how wrong everyone is. They call him a lazy, pathetic noble, but he's proving them all dead wrong. As they stroll through the academy, her respect for him skyrockets, and she finds herself wanting to match his unstoppable drive and hunger for knowledge. High above, in the main building, Instructor Chloe watches them like a hawk, her eyes locked onto Weissfind to make sure his health is holding up. Deep inside a massive office, Headmaster Gills stares at a report in total shock, unable to believe an underclassman could pull off such an insane score. Loie stands firm and confirms the news, dropping a bombshell that Weiss didn't just score high. He personally crushed over half the students who got expelled. Word of the exam results is spreading like wildfire, and even Elias admits that while Weiss is a beast, this entire year's class is packed with absolute monsters. Back in the office, Chloe drops another twist, claiming that even with Weiss's god-tier performance, it's Instructor Darius's apprentice, Alan, who really blew her away. She remembers his sheer grit, watching him crawl back from the edge of defeat time and time again, only to return more powerful than ever. As she finishes her report, her mind wanders to the silent training grounds, where she admits that 2 other students completely blew her expectations away. Sparks fly as Lilith and Cynthia collide in a whirlwind of steel, their blood-stained faces locked in a mask of pure, unyielding resolve during their savage duel. A hidden witness watches in awe at their insane progress, realizing their current mastery was once a distant dream when they first stepped foot in the academy. They've abandoned all safety, ditching the wooden practice swords for lethal steel and fighting as if every single strike could be their last. This suicidal training is exactly what turned them into monsters, and Cynthia proves it by landing a crushing strike that sends Lilith reeling. The battle ends with both warriors crashing to the dirt, lungs burning and bodies broken after pushing themselves far beyond their breaking points. In another corner of the school, a dark-haired girl shows off a different power, her hands radiating a divine light as she mends her comrade's wounds with magic. Back on the field, Cynthia stares at her rival with pure respect, but Lilith just brushes it off, claiming that Cynthia is the one who's truly terrifying. Covered in filth and blood, Lilith's eyes burn with a new fire as she swears a silent oath to reach even greater heights of power. Finally, we see what's driving her. Standing right next to Weiss, Cynthia reveals her true goal. She refuses to be a sidekick and wants to stand tall as his equal. Lilith's eyes light up with a new fire as she realizes they share the same dream, vowing to reach new heights for Weiss's sake. Kneeling over the fallen Cynthia, she swears to become a warrior Weiss can actually depend on when his life is on the line. Cynthia gives a gentle smile, insisting Lilith is already a powerhouse, but Lilith shakes her head, knowing she's still miles behind Cynthia's level. Their faces turn dead serious as they lock in on one mission. They're going to rip Carter away from the clutches of the Y Society. As the sun peaks over the mountains, Carter suddenly shivers with a bone-chilling dread, leaving a nearby woman in glasses completely baffled. Time skips forward to the big exam day, where a massive sea of students surrounds a giant, glowing magic circle etched into the courtyard. Suddenly, a guy named Duke Billion pumps his fist, shouting that they're letting fate decide their partners with a high-stakes game of rock, paper, scissors. He barks out the rules to Alan and Cheryl. The loser pairs with a total stranger, and while Alan is all in, Cheryl just sighs at Duke's constant drama. As the trio starts their chant, we see Weiss and Carter already standing side by side, ready to take on the world together. A mysterious proctor's voice booms through the air, announcing that Weiss and Carter are being warped to Mount Garail as the countdown begins. They materialize in the heart of a thick forest, where Weiss immediately locks in their plan to hunt down the highest-ranked upperclassman. A thunderous announcement echoes across the massive mountain range, confirming that every student has been dropped into the starting zone. The joint 3-year event is officially live, and while Carter looks terrified, Weiss sports a cocky smirk as Cynthia watches the field with a predator's focus. The tag survival test has finally exploded into action, with teams like Alan and Cheryl or Duke Billion bracing for the brutal battle ahead. Far from the chaos, Mika is relaxing on a sunny beach, using a defeated thug as a literal footrest until a sudden memory sharpens her gaze. It hits her like a lightning bolt. She's supposed to be getting her teaching license for the Noblesse Magic Academy, and now she's more fired up than ever. A massive white bird with piercing red eyes lets out a blood-curdling screech to signal the start of the 3rd joint tag team event. Deep in the woods, Weiss stands with his staff-wielding partner, his eyes gleaming with excitement now that the survival competition is finally underway. The stakes are higher than ever as Alan, Weiss, Cynthia, and Cheryl prepare to unleash their true power alongside a pink-haired girl clutching an ornate staff. This brutal war zone stretches across a massive wilderness filled with suffocating forests and jagged, sky-high peaks. Chaos explodes instantly as a spiky-haired student screams while lightning fries his body, but Alan just strolls past him with his blade already drawn and the job finished. Lance returns just as the twitching student hits the dirt, and Alan looks down with ice-cold eyes, casually asking what the problem is. High above the canopy, the referee bird shrieks as it watches the aftermath of that lightning-fast execution. That scream is the final word. Ariel and Vivet are officially eliminated as Alan stands tall over their broken bodies. Their defeat is sealed as the 2 students start to glow and vanish into thin air, teleporting straight back to the Noblesse Magic Academy. Just as they disappear, a new challenger creeps up with a twisted grin and a low chuckle, but Alan turns to face him with a face like stone. Deep in the woods, 2 upperclassmen watch the carnage as a guy with a bowl cut sneers at how easily these rookies walked right into a pathetic trap. His red-haired partner warns him not to get cocky, mentioning a rumor about a monster rookie this year, but the bowl-cut jerk just scoffs at the idea. The redhead points out that all the big names from their own class have already been wiped out, proving they were all hype and no bite. He grills his partner for the name of this mysterious rookie, and the bowl-cut student finally confirms it. It's Weisswitz. Right then, they catch Weiss in action, wearing a cocky smirk as he effortlessly trashes 2 opponents while the red-haired senior watches in awe. As the bowl-cut kid announces Liddy's elimination, Weiss fires a lethal crescent of energy that blindsides his foe, leaving the senior absolutely stunned by his raw power. The blast sends the fighter tumbling across the dirt, and the red-haired student panics, screaming to know where this monster even came from. Weiss sticks the landing, revealing a star insignia that proves he's elite, and the senior realizes this kid is casting high-tier fire magic without an incantation, so he decides to finally go all out. He surges forward, vaulting over a shimmering energy wall that Weiss threw up to shut him down. With his hand locked onto the target, the red-haired student roars a lethal command. "Burn to ashes, Weiss!" The massive inferno barely misses as Weiss Vincent defies physics, dashing sideways in midair to dodge the blast. The senior's brain breaks as he watches the move, stammering in disbelief that anyone could actually change direction in the middle. The disbelief twists into a panicked shout as he realizes it's true. Weiss is indeed altered his trajectory and is now diving straight towards him, sword poise destroyed. He slams into the ground with a brutal slide, and as his senior is blasted back by an invisible shockwave, Weiss coldly reveals his secret, Unnatural Wall. While his enemy crashes down, Weiss flashes back to the day he failed to master flight magic, forcing him to invent a bizarre new way to fight. He can still feel the cold touch of that first invisible barrier, the very moment he christened his creation the Unnatural Wall. The logic was simple. He summons a solid platform in thin air and launches himself off it like a human rocket. But it's risky. The wall vanishes in a heartbeat, and the higher he goes, the more it drains his mana, making true flight a distant dream. Still, it's plenty. Weiss smirks, knowing those failed flight lessons actually gave him the ultimate tactical edge to crush anyone in his path. This power is the real deal. When a mohawked punk lunged with his blade, the shimmering hexagonal shield of the Unnatural Wall stopped him dead. But before he can celebrate, a frantic warning rings out as a blinding bolt of light screams down from the heavens, locked onto its target. Boom! The explosion of light sends the mohawked student spiraling through the air, leaving Weiss stunned by the sheer raw power of the ambush. Upperclassman Mahit is officially KO'd, and when Weiss looks up, he sees a mysterious girl hovering in the sky, offering a sudden apology. The flying mage, Cardi Viola, explains that she tried to signal him about an approaching squad, but since Weiss was oblivious, she had to take them out herself. Weiss thanks her for the backup, stunned by her ability to one-shot an enemy while questioning how his own auto barrier even triggered. Cardi analyzes his style, realizing his magic fuses light and darkness. It's incredibly powerful, but so inefficient that he's limited to just a few moves. Suddenly, a smug student in glasses interrupts, mocking Weiss for being the top rookie and declaring that his database attack makes him completely unbeatable. He dramatically rips off his glasses and slams them into the dirt, dropping into a combat stance with a triumphant roar. He reveals his bizarre secret. By removing his glasses, his power surges by exactly 3.14 times the power of pi as veins bulge all over his face. Facing this weird power-up, Weiss drops to one knee and plants his sword, chanting two ominous words, Dark Heel. Archimedes is instantly trapped in a soul-draining aura, screaming as his strength vanishes under Weiss's incomprehensible, information-based attack. Weiss mocks his opponent for being unprepared and lunges forward, roaring that this outcome was never in the data. His blade strikes home, instantly incapacitating the student as the announcement rings out. Archimedes is eliminated and Weiss stands victorious. Victory in hand, he flashes a wicked grin at Carter, showing off a massive score of 7,014 points while vowing to bleed every opponent dry. She glances at her own screen, and her jaw drops. Her measly 22 points just exploded to over 1,300. With a mountain of points in their pocket, the duo pushes forward through the brutal, jagged wasteland. Elsewhere on the battlefield, Cheryl Elias links up with Alan and his partner, while Cynthia and Lilith track their every move from the shadows. Cynthia steps out with a smirk, throwing down the gauntlet for a direct challenge as she and Lilith unleash their game-breaking power. Suddenly, a massive white bird soaring above the trees is blasted out of the sky by a lethal, invisible strike. Vice Vincent sticks the landing with his blade drawn, leaving a broken opponent in his wake as the intercom screams that Mephis is officially out of the game. As he looms over his fallen prey in the clearing, Cardiola watches the carnage unfold from the safety of the high branches. She realizes the upperclassmen have vanished into thin air, and a grim-faced Weiss confirms the terrifying truth. They've stopped showing up entirely. They suspect those magic birds are the culprits, constantly screaming out the locations of fallen students and blowing everyone's cover. With a massive leap, Weiss tears through the canopy with Carter on his back, shouting that there's nowhere for their prey to hide. He commands her to ignore the weak first years and lock their sights on the veteran upperclassmen instead. Suddenly, Her eyes snap wide with razor-sharp focus. She's found her mark. Weiss knows he made the right call. He teamed up with Carter specifically for her god-tier abilities. She glides through the air with Weiss, showing off a level of flight magic that would make even the most seasoned mages jealous. Between her insane detection skills and his raw power, they're a lethal duo, and Weiss is already coiled like a spring, waiting for the signal. From her bird's-eye view, she calls out the target, a third-year student who's a master at masking their magical aura. Weiss flashes a confident smirk and announces his move. Plummeting from his perch, the second Carter gives him the green light. The terrain is perfect for an ambush, as he blends in with the swarms of magic birds to become a silent, invisible shadow falling from the sky. His blade connects with a sickening crack, and the unsuspecting student lets out a scream as the overwhelming force of the ambush crushes them. A blinding flash of light vaporizes the target instantly, proving that a strike from the shadows is a guaranteed one-shot kill in this world. He regroups with Carter, who reminds him of Milk Sensei's rule to always strike first, before Weiss confirms they only have 20 minutes left on the clock. Carter tries to talk him down by pointing at their massive score of 2,000 points, but Weiss is losing his mind, screaming at her to find the third years immediately. His eyes bulge with a terrifying, desperate hunger as he roars that their score is pathetic, his wild ambition completely swallowing any sense of caution. With fire in his gaze, he breaks down the Academy's brutal point system, explaining that more points mean godlike power and insane privileges. He lists the ranks: 5,000 for a C-rank room, 10,000 for a luxury B-rank suite, 15,000 for an A-rank tuition waiver, and the legendary S-rank for early graduation. Otherwise, you're stuck in a crowded dorm. This cutthroat system thins the herd, so by the time students reach their third year, the weak are gone, and only the elite A and B rank monsters remain. But even with all that talent, one peak remains unclimbed. In the Academy's entire history, not a single soul has ever reached the mythical S rank. Carter's face pales in horror as she asks if he's actually insane enough to hunt upperclassmen for that S-rank title. But Weiss just hits her with a cocky, mysterious smirk. Suddenly, his cool act shatters as he screams in total, hilarious desperation that she's got it all wrong. He's just desperately clawing his way to B rank. He explains that while S rank is the long-term goal, it's not the priority right now. Then, with a wild, manic look in his eyes, he asks if she knows about the insane perks of a B-rank private room. Before she can even blink, he reveals his true obsession. That room gets unlimited, premium fruit delivered straight to his door, leaving Carter absolutely floored by his bizarre motivation. His mind drifts back to a year ago, remembering a time of brutal, hellish training, where his only escape from the pain was a simple plate of perfectly sliced fruit after every meal. But even that small comfort vanished as the training became so intense, he literally lost his sense of taste, leaving him staring at a masterpiece from his butler, Zevis, wondering why he should even bother eating. He finishes his story with one legendary prize burned into his mind: the ultimate, super premium mellow melon. He remembers it vividly. The flavor of that rare melon was so powerful, it actually brought his dead taste buds back to life. And it's only available through that exclusive B-rank room service. With a roar of pure determination, he declares that to taste that heaven again, he's going to strip every single point from the upperclassmen in this exam. His terrifying intensity suddenly shifts into a desperate plea as he begs Carter for her help, promising to protect her in exchange, and totally flustered, she agrees. As they speed away, she tries to process the shock. She knew Weiss was driven, but she never dreamed his entire world revolved around food. Suddenly, it hits her like a ton of bricks. Her own family actually grows those exact mellow melons. Her face turns bright red as she imagines him visiting her, but her romantic daydream is suddenly ripped apart. A low thunder shakes the earth, and they both freeze in terror as a massive pillar of pure, chaotic darkness explodes from the woods and pierces the heavens. Weiss glares at the chaos with a deadly serious look, his voice dropping to a low growl as he warns Carter that even he can sense the danger. Her eyes bulge with pure horror as she realizes the truth. That thing is a literal nightmare, and fighting it would be a death sentence. She screams for them to run, but he's frozen in place as a giant, ornate key slams into the forest floor with a deafening crash. He ignores her warnings and dives straight out of the sky, slamming onto the ground and drawing his blade in one fluid, lethal motion. A wild, hungry grin splits his face as he realizes the fun is just beginning, and he rockets forward like a bullet while Cardi watches from above in absolute disbelief. He skids to a stop at a peaceful clearing where a girl with flowing pale hair sits on a stump, looking like a goddess as birds dance around her feet. Her eyes peer through her hair with a mysterious smirk as she calmly asks if he's the legendary Weiss Vincent Cohen. This is the second-year student, Eva Everall, and she watches him with a cold, unreadable gaze while a tiny bird perches on her finger. He's shaking with pure adrenaline as he whips his blade forward, leveling it straight at her. He shouts that it's an honor to finally meet the legendary Eva Everall, and right then and there, he demands a duel. A chilling laugh escapes her lips as her grin widens with dark delight. She purrs that she's absolutely thrilled to be challenged by such a famous, wise coin. Her reputation is the stuff of nightmares, and as she stands, a crushing aura of raw power radiates from her silhouette. Make no mistake, Eva Everall is the undisputed strongest student in the entire academy. He knows her terrifying secret better than anyone else. In his past life, she was the ultimate hidden boss, a literal walking cheat code. She was a game-breaking glitch whose power shattered every law of logic. He remembers her tragic lore. Eva was so insanely overpowered that she'd grown completely bored of academy life. In the original story, she wasn't just a student, she was the final boss. He recalls that after this very exam, she's destined to vanish from the academy forever. She's the one character no player has ever managed to take down, and his grip tightens on his sword until his knuckles turn white. With only 10 minutes left on the clock, his resolve hardens into steel. He knows this is his one and only chance to face her, and he's going to pour every ounce of his soul into defeating the monster smirking right in front of him. With a manic grin, he roars that he's going all out and lunges forward with his blade held high. As he charges, a massive shockwave from their collision rips through the forest, sending his companions reeling as Alan screams Cheryl's name in pure terror. He turns to Cynthia and Cheryl with a grim look, telling them they're the last ones standing and begging them not to take this brutal fight personally. Cynthia isn't backing down. She commands Alan to get ready, shouting that if they crush the monster even Weiss couldn't kill, he'll finally have to respect them. Those words ignite something primal inside Alan. His muscles bulge and his face twists in agony as a massive aura explodes from his body, leaving Cynthia and Cheryl frozen in shock. Alan is finally awakening. The earth splits and smolders under a suffocating heat as the dust settles on their final clash. Weiss Vincent and Eva Everall stand amidst the ruins, locked in a deadly stare until a voice booms across the battlefield. The exam is officially over. Weiss is drenched in sweat and gasping for air, while Eva looks like she hasn't even broken a sweat. She calls him out for holding back, and he bitterly admits he never thought he'd need magic today. She gives him a cold, "not bad," as the clock hits 0, leaving Weiss to let out a a hollow, desperate laugh. He can only stare at her in pure disbelief, one single thought screaming in his head: Eva Everall is a total monster. His brain scrambles to process the defeat. He threw everything at her, from absolute barrier to dark eye and dark heel. He played every single trump card in his deck, but nothing worked. His broken defenses lie in ruins at her feet, a pathetic reminder of her godlike strength. He hangs his head as the crushing weight of defeat sinks in. He used to think this academy was a joke, a place where no one could touch him. He was planning to walk away from this place forever once the exam ended. But now, a new savage fire ignites in his eyes. Across the crater, Eva smirks with a predatory glint in her eyes. She tilts her head, and her voice cuts through the silence, telling him she's actually taken a liking to him. A wild, savage grin stretches across his face as he decides right then he's sticking around this academy a little longer. Just as he makes his choice, Cardi Viol streaks across the sky on her staff, her voice booming out a final announcement to everyone left. With the duel over, Eva Everall coldly tells a trembling Vice Vincent that he's being shipped straight back to the Noblesse Magic Academy. With a sudden whoosh, the fighters vanish into thin air, leaving the shattered arena in total silence. It's finally over. Suddenly, a dark memory flashes back, a haunting reminder of a massive mistake from the past. Cardi Viola grips her staff with pure relief, realizing that Eva is staying and she's dodged the dreaded expulsion. Across the crowded field, Cynthia Violetta and Lilith Scarlet limp through the crowd while Weiss watches them from the shadows. Weiss's eyes nearly pop out of his head. They're absolutely trashed, and he can't believe anyone had the power to take them down. Every step is pure agony for Cynthia, and with her eyes clamped shut, she starts desperately apologizing to Lilith. She admits her own ego blinded her, confessing that her obsession with her new power is exactly why they're in this mess. She keeps apologizing, heartbroken that she dragged Lilith into this nightmare and forced her to suffer. Lilith shuts her down, insisting she's the one to blame for ruining Cynthia's record, all while Weiss watches with a mysterious gaze. Weiss listens closely as Eva keeps her back turned, quietly confessing her desperate hunger for victory. She reveals her true goal was to take down Alan, a shocker that leaves Weiss completely stunned. His eyes scan the field, looking past the defeated duo to find Alan kneeling in the dirt. Alan speaks with raw, gritty intensity, while Cynthia listens with a tired, graceful smile despite her loss. Alan suddenly snaps his head up, sensing Weiss's piercing stare from across the clearing as both rivals freeze. Their eyes lock in a fierce showdown, Alan radiating grim resolve while Weiss flashes a cocky, challenging smirk. That silent exchange brings the massive tag team exam to a close, leaving winners and losers together on the bloodied field. As the dust settles, the students return to the daily grind of their hectic academy lives. Victory tastes sweet, and after the exam, Weiss is promoted to a prestigious rank that guarantees him a life of total luxury. He expected the peace to last, but stomping low-ranked students every day is getting stale. These easy wins offer absolutely no challenge. The class is in full swing when Chloe prepares to introduce a special guest, but a polite voice from the rattling doorway cuts her off mid-sentence. Chloe is visibly rattled as the guest enters, sending a shockwave of awe and terror through the students. Duke Billion's fists tremble with admiration while the others gasp, but Weiss is left paralyzed, his eyes wide with pure horror. Cold sweat pours down his face as an overwhelming pressure slams into him. He feels a visceral change take hold, realizing with dawning terror that his vision is slowly turning a blood-red hue. For Weiss Vincent, the nightmare is back. Standing there is the imposing Mika Eotis, her icy, unyielding gaze a brutal reminder of a past terror he can't escape. She looms at the front of the room, her voice devoid of any warmth, as she introduces herself as Milk Avidas, the woman taking over their combat training starting today. Her gaze sweeps the room for questions, while Weiss sits there gasping for air, unable to speak, until one hand suddenly shoots into the air with total confidence. It's Duke Billion. With a curious grin, he asks the big question. Why would someone like Milk Sensei bother coming to the academy as a substitute? A massive wave of relief washes over Weiss, and he silently thanks Duke for having the guts to ask the one thing he was way too terrified to say. Her expression darkens as pure annoyance clouds her eyes, muttering the question to herself as if wondering why she's even there. Her patience finally snaps as she barks, "Shut up," with a voice like ice, ordering them to stop asking such brainless questions. A heavy, suffocating silence grips the classroom, yet Duke Billion stays totally unfazed, with his arms still thrust into the air. Watching this madness, Weiss grinds his teeth in pure frustration, screaming in his head, "What is wrong with this crazy woman?" Outside the room, Instructor Chloe spills the beans, explaining that they only brought in Miss Milk because they're desperately short-staffed. Sirius explains to Weiss that since the tag test, the upperclassmen have been demanding extra combat training to sharpen their skills. Weiss realizes the seniors are desperate to prove they're better than the freshmen, while Chloe introduces the terrifyingly stern Milk Avidus. Chloe is drowning in regret, realizing that calling Mika was a catastrophic mistake, and she's terrified for what might happen to Weiss. Mika's dark silhouette looms over a startled Chloe like a predator, asking if she's having unnecessary thoughts, making Chloe shriek in terror. Mika's eyes lock onto Weiss, who panics and swears he was just spacing out, terrified that she can read his mind as she coldly mutters, "I see her." Her voice booms across the jagged training grounds as she declares, "Fine then, let's see some push-ups." Weiss hits the dirt instantly, muscles trembling as he cranks out reps under the piercing gaze of Mika and the entire class. The instructor looms over him, noting his massive growth over the last few months while Weiss grinds his teeth, drenched in sweat. She leans down with a sadistic grin, and a chilling realization hits Weiss. She didn't come here to teach. She came here to break him. Duke Billion watches from afar, baffled by this new teacher and stunned to see the rebellious Weiss actually following orders without a single word of protest. Mika Audiz's eyes flare with pure, unadulterated rage, sending a wave of terror through the students as her mood shifts instantly. She screams at two lagging students, demanding to know if they call that pathetic crawl running, leaving them shaking in their boots. A wicked smile creeps across her face as she realizes this entire academy is nothing but a playground for spoiled brats. Her voice thunders across the horizon, ordering the entire class to scale the mountain until the sun goes down, sparking a chorus of desperate screams. While the class panics, Mika turns to Weiss with a sinister grin, ordering him to climb that mountain while doing push-ups the entire way, leaving him to mutter in disbelief that it's impossible. The students watched in pure horror as Mika turned their training into a literal living nightmare. This brutal reality hit them fast. And now, every time training day rolls around, even the toughest students like Duke and Alan are shaking in their boots. But just when they thought they couldn't take any more, a miracle appeared, a massive, crystal-clear pool, shimmering like a desert oasis. The guys stood shirtless at the water's edge, whispering in total confusion and wondering what kind of twisted plan their instructor had cooked up this time. Mika's sharp voice cuts through the chatter as she apologizes for the delay, but the boys are distracted by a mysterious group approaching from the distance. She barks an order for silence as the students stand ready in their swimwear, announcing that their grueling water training begins right now. Pure chaos erupts as the guys explode into a roaring, muscle-flexing frenzy that echoes across the water, while Chris watches from the sidelines with total disgust. A fierce battle breaks out on a floating platform where Weiss Vincent dominates his opponents with such skill that even the stoic Duke Billion is left impressed. His technique is surgical, using his weapon to hook his enemies and completely shatter their balance. This sends Cynthia, Chris, and Carter spiraling out of control, tossing them up and down like ragdolls in the water. That chaotic bouncing motion creates a wild spectacle that leaves everyone completely mesmerized. From the sidelines, Duke Billion and the guys are losing their minds, hailing it as a god-tier move only a top-ranked freshman could pull off. The move is a total success, blasting one opponent into the water while the other spins helplessly across the platform. A soaking wet Alan approaches Weiss with pure respect, admitting he was totally wrong and hailing him as the absolute greatest. Weiss flashes a cocky grin at the girls and asks who's next, but Carter, Chris, and Cynthia instantly brand him a total scumbag. His ego crumbles the moment Mika steps up with a massive spiked club, calmly declaring it's her turn, while Weiss stares in shock. The sight breaks him completely, and he screams that he's sick of this happening over and over as he begs Mika to just let him stop. That victory is short-lived, as his furious classmates grab him and hurl him right back into the water with the opponents he just beat. Thanks to his antics, the fed-up instructor cancels water training for good, leaving the boys' side of the dining hall completely deserted. In a quiet corner, Carter Viol eats alone until Cynthia Violetta approaches with her tray, catching the eye of another student across the room. A pair of students watch Carter eat in total isolation, whispering that she's only hiding away because Weiss and Cynthia are the new power couple. Her face drops as the harsh reality sinks in. Weiss and Cynthia are officially partners for the tag team event, leaving her abandoned and alone. The bullies corner her at the table, sneering that she's a pathetic leech who only avoided expulsion by riding Weiss's coattails. Carter finally snaps, slamming her fist onto the table with a deafening thud as her eyes burn with pure, unbridled rage. She fires back with venom, calling her bully a worthless parasite who only survives the academy by clinging to someone actually powerful. The bullies don't flinch, sneering that without Weiss to protect her, they're going to make sure she's kicked out of school for good. Just as they leave, the legendary Cynthia Violetta arrives with her squad, leaving Carter frozen in absolute shock and terror. Cynthia and Chris tower over her with an invitation to lunch, but their predatory, bone-chilling smiles scream danger. Panic surges through her veins as she realizes she just traded one minor annoyance for a much more terrifying threat. Her mind spirals out of control until Cynthia's voice cuts through the air, staring her down from across the table with her intimidating crew. Cynthia drops a bombshell, admitting she's completely changed her mind about her, leaving Carter totally stunned and speechless. She brings up the joint tag team exam, where Carter and Weiss supposedly teamed up to crush 24 upperclassmen. Carter panics and waves his hands, swearing Weiss did all the heavy lifting alone. But Cynthia points out that it was a record-shattering victory regardless. Chris Schlegel leans in with a look of pure doubt, refusing to believe even a genius like Weiss could pull off a stunt like that solo. Cynthia nods, crediting their win to Carter's insane flight magic and admitting even her own team couldn't have hit those numbers. With a frustrated smile, she admits they were totally outclassed, while Chris softens up and begs Carter to keep an eye on Weiss. The group finally reveals their hand as Eva Everall demands to know why she's been avoiding them all this time, leaving Carter totally flustered. Seeing Carter's awkward silence, Cynthia Violetta's face melts into a warm smile as she finally gives in. She officially invites them in, declaring they're all on Team Weiss now and hoping they can all become close friends. Tears well up, and her face turns bright red as the sudden kindness overwhelms her, leaving Cardi only able to squeak out a tiny yes. As the group sits down to eat, Cynthia's eyes bug out when she realizes their meal is frozen solid. But even with the food turned to ice, She cheerfully tells everyone to dig in while it's still warm. The frozen food makes Cynthia realize Weiss is missing, and just hearing his name sends Carter into a blushing frenzy as he notices Weiss's summer is gone too. Elsewhere, Weiss Vincent is a total wreck, wrapped head to toe in bandages, while Mika Aodos stands over him with a terrifyingly sweet smile. He begs her for mind healing, but she just beams and gives him a flat-out no. Back at the table, Cynthia reveals how she used Carter's training to absolutely demolish those bullies, and we watch as the disgraced punks are kicked out of the academy forever. A young boy stands on a hill, paralyzed with horror, as his entire village is swallowed by a sea of fire. The roaring flames reflect in his wide eyes as he whispers a single broken word. No way. In that one moment, his entire life was erased, leaving behind only the charred remains of a family portrait smoldering in the ruins of his home. Years later, the boy has grown into a man named Alan, and as he trains in a rustic clearing, he asks a young woman about the legendary Noblesse Magic Academy. Alan's breath hitches and sweat pours down his face as he looks at her with desperate hope, asking if graduating will finally grant him the status of a noble. Cheryl Elias confirms his hopes, explaining that anyone who survives that academy gains authority equal to the highest nobility. She explains that even a commoner can gain the right to raid dungeons across the globe, opening up a massive network of travel that puts the entire world within his reach. The massive warrior freezes over the roasting fire, the sheer weight of her words finally hitting him like a ton of bricks. A dark realization ignites in Alan's mind. This power isn't for status. It's the ultimate weapon to slaughter the monsters that butchered his family. His eyes turn to cold steel as he glares at Cheryl, his voice dripping with absolute certainty. I've made my choice. With fire in his soul, he declares his new mission. He's going to conquer the entrance exam for Noblesse Academy. He endured hellish training with Cheryl, Darius, and his master, pushing his body to the absolute limit, but the outcome was a total nightmare. The exam was a complete bloodbath, leaving him broken and face down in the mud while his enemy towered over his shattered body. Weiss Vincent was a literal monster on the battlefield, wearing a sadistic smirk as he looked down at his fallen prey. But even after that brutal beatdown, fate had a massive surprise in store. Against all odds, he actually passed. Sadly, that flicker of joy was snuffed out in an instant. The Academy's ruthless point system pushed him to the brink of expulsion, while Weiss constantly tormented him, mocking him as a pathetic loser fit only for point farming. That constant disrespect finally lit a fuse inside him, and he let out a savage roar of defiance. He was done being a victim and refused to let anyone take another thing from him. From that moment on, their relationship took a bizarre turn as he realized Weiss's eyes were constantly locked onto him. Was the top-ranked freshman actually acknowledging his power? He became convinced that Weiss finally saw him as a worthy opponent, and the craving for a rematch began to consume him. This mutual bloodlust fueled his drive to keep winning every single battle until he finally stood above his rival. Next time, he wouldn't just compete, he would be the one standing victorious. He looked up through the bruises and the blood dripping from his lip, his eyes glowing with pure fire as he spat out a promise. Weiss, I'm going to crush you. Just you wait. But that determination instantly curdled into a terrifying, explosive rage. His face darkened into a snarl, baring his teeth like a cornered beast in total frustration. We see a classmate desperately pinning him back to stop him from lunging, while Weiss Vincent barely even spares him a glance. Weiss just turns his back with icy indifference and walks away with someone else. Weiss finally pauses to drop a cold, soul-crushing truth. I expected more from you, Those dismissive words cut deeper than any blade, leaving Alan screaming his rival's name in a fit of powerless fury. Right there, in the grand hallway, Alan stands his ground and barks at Weiss, forcing the elite student to stop and face him while the entire school watches the drama unfold. With his fists trembling and his face contorted in agony, Alan screams at the top of his lungs that he absolutely hates Weiss with every fiber of his being. Weiss's face twists into a terrifying, manic grin as he tells Alan not to sweat it, because the hatred is 100% mutual. As Weiss and his crew strut away, stunned onlookers whisper about the heated clash, knowing damn well that wasn't just a friendly chat. We cut to a massive, desolate courtyard, where the thunderous ring of clashing steel echoes off the cold stone walls. Weiss is in a total frenzy, trading savage blows with his master as their blades blur into a whirlwind of steel and sweat. From high above, Mika watches with a devious smirk, teasing Weiss about his intense workout while he stops to catch his gasping breath. Weiss calls out to Mika-sensei, his mind a total mess, until she drops down beside him and asks the million-dollar question, is this all about Alan? Later, Mika huddles with instructor Darius, confirming the rumors that the bad blood between Weiss and Alan is reaching a breaking point. While he swings his sword, Weiss flashes back to history class, fuming over how pathetic and soft Alan is, and that realization makes his blood absolutely boil. His rage stems from a brutal lesson about the kingdom's cruelty, where the sight of heavy iron shackles on bare feet serves as a grim reminder of their world's darkness. In the flashback, Weiss stands before the class and drops a cold, hard truth. Most slaves are just the desperate children of the poor. He ranted about how these kids are born into poverty with zero hope, forced to choose between a life of crime or a slow death in the streets. But just as he started explaining how the system keeps them down, someone cut him off. Alan suddenly snapped, dropping a bombshell that left everyone speechless. He claimed the slave system isn't actually evil. His eyes blazed with a terrifying intensity, showing he truly believed every single word. That insane claim sparked a massive confrontation, and the second class ended. Weiss cornered Alan in the hall, grabbing his shoulder with a fist clenched in pure, cold rage. Back in the present, Weiss tells Mika a completely different story, insisting that Alan actually called slavery an absolute evil. He went even further, telling Mika that the usually emotionless Alan had the audacity to say the world doesn't even need nobles. Weiss's knuckles turned white as he admitted how much Alan's naive idealism pisses him off, while Mika realized just how insane it was for him to say that in a room full of aristocrats. To her, Alan was just talking in circles, acting like avoiding a fight solves everything without offering a real plan. It was nothing but empty, useless preaching. She mocked his ridiculous logic, knowing humans are driven by hunger and war, and she couldn't believe his solution to the orphans created by battle was just for people to help out if they could. Suddenly, Weiss's voice snaps her back to reality, demanding to know if she's even paying attention, and she jumps, quickly nodding that she's still with him. She breaks down Alan's tragic past in the orphanage, suggesting his words cut Weiss much deeper than he's willing to admit. Her words clearly strike a nerve, leaving Mika to wonder why Weiss exploded over a simple theory, unless his rage is fueled specifically by Alan. A dark realization finally clicks for Weiss, and a twisted grin spreads across his face as he uncovers the true source of his burning hatred. Seeing his terrifying expression, Mika grows concerned and asks him straight up if he truly hates Alan that much. Mika turns to walk away, casually remarking that there's nothing wrong with having a difference of opinion, but she warns him that the adult world won't tolerate these outbursts before she grips her sword and issues a challenge. Brace yourself, Weiss. Weiss accepts instantly, lunging forward as their blades collide in a brilliant shower of sparks beneath the glowing full moon. During their brutal training, Mika tells Weiss to stay controlled, but he ignores her and charges in with a roar, only for her to effortlessly dodge and mock his reckless style. She flips over him with ease, feeling a wave of nostalgia as Weiss's sword crackles with energy before revealing she was once a student at this very academy. From the balcony above, she explains that every student is destined to clash with others, leaving Weiss in total disbelief as their steel screams against each other once more. His mind reels from the shock, sweat dripping down his face as he desperately tries to process this impossible revelation. He's memorized Mika-sensei's profile from the game 1,000 times, yet he's never heard a single word about this hidden past. Her gaze softens as she looks down at him, confessing that she's kept this buried for years because the memory is just too painful to face. Then, she drops the bombshell. She was expelled from the academy with a pathetic score of 0 before she ever got the chance to show her true strength. He can't wrap his head around Mika-sensei being weak, but she shuts him down, admitting she just wasn't strong enough yet, reminding him that everyone starts at the bottom. She presses her blade right against his throat, confessing that back then she was blinded by her own massive ego and overestimated her power. While Instructor Darius watches from the balcony above, Mika realizes that the massive gap between her ego and reality is what sealed her fate. High above on the balcony, Darius stares down at them, convinced that people like Weiss never truly change. Down in the yard, Mika admits she used to feel the same way, but she sees that Weiss has changed, reminding him that while convictions matter, sometimes you have to fight to find your way back. She flashes a knowing smile, telling him he's nothing like her because he already knows exactly which path he needs to follow. This sudden wave of kindness leaves him totally stunned and at a loss for words, making him wonder if she's finally lost her mind. Her face turns dead serious as she watches his reaction, thoughtfully noting that anyone can develop a sense of awareness if they truly try. She suddenly pivots the conversation, ordering him to prepare for his next grueling training session, a shift that catches him completely off guard. As she lays out the details, the realization hits him like a ton of bricks. It's finally time for that legendary trial to begin. Visions of a brutal frozen mountain range flash through his mind as she drops a chilling warning. Failure here doesn't just mean expulsion, it means a fate far worse. They're heading into the lethal Northern Gary Mountains for survival training, a frozen hellscape where bloodthirsty monsters hunt and students die every single year. Back at the yard, Weiss boldly declares he's not going down, but Mika shuts him down fast, warning him that her own downfall came from that exact same overconfidence. She begs him not to let his top-tier rank go to his head, desperate to save him from her own tragic mistakes, while Instructor Darius watches from the shadows as Weiss finally admits she's right. She hoists her weapon and challenges him to one more round, and Weiss can't help but smirk as he tells her to give it everything she's got. They collide instantly with a thunderous crack of wood on wood, both of them wearing wild, savage grins as the pure adrenaline of the fight takes over. Their blades clash with a thunderous roar, echoing through the massive pillars of the training hall. Instructor Darius watches from the shadows before his hand reaches for a mysterious switch on the wall. "Lights out," he bellows, and as the lanterns die, a masked figure slams the massive door shut, trapping Mika and Weiss in total darkness. High above, the full moon pierces through the drifting clouds, illuminating the cold night sky. Inside the eerie silence, Mika and Weiss stand frozen in the moonlight while Darius turns his back and abandons them. From deep within the grand building, Mika finally breaks the tension to call it a day, and Weiss quietly agrees.